Hi, this is Jsu Garcia, and welcome to the co-director's commentary. I'm going to guide you through the movie. A lot of Blu-ray, DVD type media formats. They like to hear the directors commentating during watching the movie. But because of, on high God, I got a great idea talking it over with JR. Hey, what about if we do a visual director's commentary? Okay, so here we go. The old days, it used to be an audio type of commentary underneath the audio of the movie. So here we are. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to post this obviously on the internet. You're going to be putting the disc in your you could be playing it on your computer or another computer or your home or wherever. And it's always going to be online. So what you do is, if you look at the screen, I'd like you to sync it up with my playing of the movie. We both have the same movie. This is the beginning of the movie. It's John Rogers Scott JR Productions logo, as you can see. It's JR walking across the screen, okay? So about right here, put him right in the center. We hit play together and we will be synced so that what I'm talking about, you'll be matching what's on screen, okay? I'm lowering the volume on my part. You can raise your volume on your part, and here we go. So just a quick thing about how we made this. Scott JR Productions Scott is my nickname that JR called me, and that's his son, and JR is his name. And so I've used the word Scott in other films, especially in The Wayshower, so it's kind of cool. And obviously it's like JR transcending from the earth into the spirit. That was always the logo that we do films that are uplifting and more in the spiritual manner. Okay, so here we go. Sync your movie to JR in the center. His belly is hitting the light. Okay, so here we go. 3.5 hours, rock and roll. So the movie begins with JR obviously saying, when we were, I'm going to lower the volume. When we were talking it over with the editors, Josh Muscatine and Aaron Thacker, we were thinking about, what do we really want to say? And by the way, this idea was Chris Harrington is a good friend of mine, and he thought about the world, to be on top of it, transcending. And what we wanted to start the movie off was, there's Henry Conyers. What we wanted to start the movie with is JR's affirmations, which you heard. And that's really what this movie's about. And so here we go. We're showing old 8mm that we ended up restoring. That's JR photos. Aaron Thacker did all the great 3D work. So we had to, through the help of Barbara Whelan, we were able to go through all, thousands and thousands of photos. This is Rains, Utah. Obviously, you can hear JR talking about it. That's the old Lincoln. But apparently he went up there with the older staff and shot 8mm. Now, the 8mm that we restored, obviously 8mm film, that's his mother and father. 8mm film is probably one of the best type of quality formats. That's Aaron Thacker, once again, with making the three-dimensional look. We spent a lot of time doing that. The 8mm, we turned it from 8mm, and Now Productions, they did a great job of basically preserving it in the vault. And a lot of the tithing and seeding, I can guarantee you took care of the expenses on the old, all the old materials being basically taken care of. That's Delisle Hinkins, JR's brother. We went up to Utah to shoot that. But basically the 8mm, we had about 51 plus hours of 8mm to be restored into 2K, 2000 across, from 8mm, which is this little And that's JR's mother. I'm going to be drinking some water. These are my favorite parts in the beginning because we were able, Aaron Thacker was able to 3D the photo, separate the background, the middle layer, and the front layer. And look at how he puts snow particles. To give you an idea what it was like in rains. Now, of course, I was up there in 1994, and then 2000 something, and it's just all ruins, really. It was an old mining town. And a lot of this footage also is Delisle's footage, Delisle and Elda Hinkins footage. They shot it in 8mm, and JR and the old staff shot it in Super 8. So there was a lot of fishing in those days. You know, a la a river runs through it. That's all the trout. Let me raise this a little bit. So that's Parley Hinkins. I wanted to give, in the beginning of the movie, and by the way, I'm co-director of this movie, but the one that gave me all the ideas is my other co-director, John Roger. When you're working with him, you're really getting the juices to. That's JR as a dancer. Let me see if I could do that. So these were sent by his sister. I can't think of her name right now, but I think it's Linda. Helen or Linda. I think Helen passed away, but Linda sent all these old photos. Because I remember JR was an actor and a dancer. And this is up in Rains, his school. And, you know, it's very interesting because in the movie The Wayshower, you can get that on iTunes, by the way. It's more of a fictionalized story. And then Spiritual Warriors, another film that JR and I did. It's another fictionalized story. And then ultimately, I think those two movies really filled in the area that wasn't documented, but fictionalized it. And when we started to work on the Mystical Traveler documentary, then I realized, wow, that's a lot of the stuff that we wouldn't want to put in the movie because it's already documented. Why make a fiction movie about something that's already documented? I mean, look at the great photos that we pulled out. That's Delisle, that's Elda, that's JR. They look like the Dead End Kids. So you guys, I hope you can see that's Delisle Hinkins. And, you know, for style, I wanted to do, we were using the red camera, which, thanking very much Laurie Lerner, the producer, really purchased the Epic red camera. It's the 3rd generation, I think, today's cameras. So we were working, I mean, we spent like 2.5 years doing this movie. So we were working with the Red 1, the 1st generation, with a better sensor. And then we went to the Scarlet, and then we went to, these are all just camera terms. Sorry if I'm boring you to death. But that's Mom and Dad, Parley and Irma. I mean, you can, I'm going to just keep talking because this, you can watch the movie without me and then you'll get the storyline. But for me, I wanted to basically tell you the work that we put into this and the storyline and what we chose. And you know, there have been people that have, you know, good and bad, they tell you they liked it or it's too long or whatever, but it's really about following the journey. Look, he's on the train. It's following his journey, and there is no time limit on his journey. So, I mean, he's got 50+ years working as a mystical traveler. I don't have 50 years of editing, but we could take, I mean, we capsulize it into like, and these are beautiful chapter breaks with Elda and Delisle's 8mm of their kids. So we decided to, oh, this is Sally Jesse Raphael. This is her voice. Very cool lady. But basically, I wanted to also say on that, we were able to find out so much. And Aaron Thacker, this is all Aaron Thacker's graphics, man, to be able to pull JR into you. Anyway, many people have different ways of doing the documentaries. I think documentaries is one of the most difficult kind of genre to make, because you really have to just dig in like some investigative reporter detective to, and that's what we did between Josh and myself. We were looking at footage, especially in San Francisco, you know, or 8mm of a town we don't know, and we checked the background, we checked the newspaper that was underneath the table of a photo, and we would zoom in, and by zooming in we were able to tell what city the paper was from, which would then tell us that that's where JR was staying. Then we would figure out, well, that's who he was with, his roommate. They were in San Francisco. And he, you know, all these stories he's told you, that's Delisle and JR fishing up in Utah. So, and there's a little bit of the Mormonism in this, but we really wanted to stay clear and let JR narrate it, and not be, not have, really the best thing that I experienced was, for me, how can I get out of the way and let, you know, the editors who are not in the movement of spiritual inner awareness, they're not in the church, they're not ministers, they're editors from the world. I pulled them in, and they basically entrenched themselves in learning about the teachings, who JR is, what JR is, and you know, how best to really do story. Story is more important than anything else. And if they hadn't have done the story, it would have been horrible. Matt Rondell, to give him credit, was one of the first editors. He edited the movie The Wayshower. I don't want to leave him out, but Matt Rondell, we went through a set of editors, and Matt did a lot of the graphics and cut, and then he had to go do a job. And then that's where Josh Muscatine and Aaron Thacker came in. Aaron Thacker would be the 3D man, and Josh would be the editor, the story cutter. And Josh was very good at listening to hours and hours and hours and hours of JR's seminars and extrapolating and piecing together a storyline. Because if out of the 25 years I've been listening to JR, 27, he's always told stories about his life and growing up. That's JR. And those are the Utah backgrounds, the mountains. And every chapter break is in the frame of the 8mm, and we wanted, that's cornet, and we wanted to give you a break and tell you where we're going. That's Elda. I didn't interview much of Elda. I did interview a lot of Elda, it's just we didn't use a lot. And the whole thing was, I wish I could spend, which every person that I interviewed, which is over 100+ people in the movement, I wish I could make movies of them individually. But it's impossible. It's like, in no way it was like Schindler's List, but for me it was like, oh, I'm going to leave my friends out. I wish, in the movie, to me, it's like I would have liked to have had everybody I could in the movie, but I can't, and we would definitely bore a whole lot of people to death. So I came up with an idea, and you know, spirit inspired, SI. But the whole YouTube phenomenon is great. So in your Blu-ray, you'll have a link that you'll be able to go to the YouTube channel that I created for this, the Mystical Traveler YouTube channel. I think it's Mystical Traveler Doc. And you'll be able to see, I'm going to post, and I'm keeping posting and I'm going to keep interviewing people, and I'm going to keep posting people's full interviews up there. A quick thing I wanted to throw. Look at these old parades that were happening up in Huntington, Utah. So one of the things I wanted to shout out to is in the beginning, like 2.5+ years ago, we were interviewing I think it was Joanne Kane, who passed away, Steve Farrick, and you know, a couple other people I can't remember, but it was great to get them on film or video for archival reasons, and also it's kind of cool because you know, one of the things that I concluded, this is great footage of Delisle before and after his accident. In trying to save a life, Delisle, I think almost 80% of his body was burnt, 3-degree burns, in a coal mining accident. And this is the, you know, this is the life of JR. This is the environment in which JR comes out of, and then becomes this amazing teacher, because all these hard times, so you think, you know, he's like a depression baby. It really kind of makes you tough. That's JR's dog, Skitsy. It's got a great story about the dog. But this is where we were. I'm going to be jumping all over the place. This is this apartment that was very mysterious in the 8mm. So I had Josh zoom in, and Josh would zoom in here. You're going to find out the beer, right? So we're like, hey, who's this? That's JR. You can see his psychology books. So he's studying. Where is he? You know, we check. You got to really be like CIA stuff, you know, like look at the band. What year is the stereo? Are you watching? Yeah. So, yeah. So down here by the table, there's a newspaper. And that's how we found out it was the San Francisco Chronicles or something like that. These are all his psychology books. And they're in his library now. So that's how we investigated these 8mm. And of course, once we, I think it was Cinelicious. Cinelicious was the company that restored the 8mm. Spent a lot of money. I want to thank, look, the newspapers. We were all reading all this. That newspaper, zoomed in, found out it was San Francisco. That was his roommate. So, you know, the best thing was to restore this 8mm. It looked pretty, it was scanned back in the 90s, and it was standard def, and it didn't look very good. And Cinelicious colored it. And, you know, Now Productions was able to, you know, restore and save a lot of the videos. I think these are old videos. And really the first, and I can't remember the camera, but you're going to see some footage in here of Laren Bright interviewing JR in Florida, like 1972. And the footage is, I don't remember the name of the camera, but it's a camera that was tethered to some, had like an umbilical cord to some big contraption, and that's what it was recording. And when I found it in the vault, this is this mysterious woman that JR loved. And we tried to, you know, go slow so we can tell where this apartment or house is from. And we were looking at the rolling hills. We think it's somewhere in Northern California. Because JR's stories, he doesn't name people. So then we were finding out that, oh my God, the stories that he's telling, here's the 8mm on those people. And then we found like, we found out some names. We found out that JR had gone to Finhorn, and he was really trying to figure out all these metaphysical things, whether they were real or not. I mean, JR really went to go find things, and sort of to find out, is that where the truth is? You know, are they telling the truth? Are they real? And it's kind of cool. This San Francisco footage. That's 8mm. I mean, it was amazing. Now, because of the restoration, we can see and that's that bridge that's no longer there. I think it was destroyed in the earthquake. See, that JR had a Sitka or a Simca. He talks about it. So here we are. I freeze framed this. I put this on Facebook. I found out what the car was. I don't know much about cars. And by finding out the car, we were finding out that particular model came out at a certain year, and we were able to find out that JR filmed this that year, I think 1958, which puts him in, Delisle, I think, had the accident 57, 58, but it puts him in San Francisco. Now, this is interesting footage that I took from, I forgot, the Quimby Center, some photos that JR had. These are really cool photos. Look at it. And this is 8mm. And that's the actual, dirt. Or Sally Jesse Raphael, who worked under Larry King in Miami. And look at the look. I mean, this shaggy rug. So there was a lot of I mean, the era to see these 8mm, and I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so you can see the shaggy rug, that whole look, and you can see, I mean, I've heard some of the tapes that didn't make it in here of his interviews in Florida. And Florida, to me, you know, when people ask, hey man, Philadelphia, New York, you know, we just didn't have any documentation on Philadelphia. So to give credit to the old staff members, they documented JR behind the scenes more than in the seminars. Now, everyone, we just film 4 cameras in seminars. But we don't film JR or John going in the car, you know, going to get some ice cream and just hanging out. Except when he started to do the Pat 4s, and, you know, when we do trips, even now, there's behind the scenes. This is John. It's kind of a mysterious, they're all on top of the pyramid. When JR's talking about the near-death experience, you know, there was a chunk in this movie that isn't documented. You know, video, audio, or photograph is JR getting into the accident and going into a coma and having a near-death experience. So, you know, you fill those up with images. But I wanted to say, I forgot my thought, but let's see where we're at. So this is, you know, we really took it slow. And, you know, there was cases where David Hinkins talks about the Rosicrucians and how Irma was into it. So I think the spiritual, I mean, this is me. Now remember, I'm 50 years old. It's me being with JR all this time. It's, so my take on it is in the way that we finished the movie and JR approved it. And the Christ energy has already been blessed and blessed the movie, according to John Roger. So the way that the editors and I saw it, it's colored through us. So if you out there had the same material, you would cut the movie and edit it your way, and it would still be a great movie. This is the way I color. This is the way I color. This is my canvas and JR's canvas on how we're going to put it out. And it's JR's voice from beginning to end, with his students and initiates commenting, so that you're not completely, you know, brainwashed. You're somewhat brainwashed. And that's what I concluded with, is with all the, I think that's Dave Hinkins, this 8mm, JR's nephew. And that's Candace Simmergrand, his student. And this is the, just if you want to do technical, this was the first camera that we used, and we were just, I didn't know what I was doing when we first, I generally don't know what I'm doing. And that's a good place. You don't want to think you know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're not open to being influenced by things. But the main thing was to collect all the photos, categorize them, and interview every student while they're alive and every initiate minister that's in the movement of spiritual inner awareness. And even not, because I got Dalai and Elda, I got JR's classmate who's in this movie at the end. But JR was into cars. He definitely liked that Mustang. And I've heard him talk about it. You can see the rain in the background. And it was great to see. I got Candace's perspective before JR got the traveler keys and then after. And, you know, she makes a distinction, which is kind of interesting. So, I mean, I approached this, look, I'm a John Roger, I drank the Kool-Aid, I'm in. But I had to pull back, be the director, be as objective as I could, and go for it. Tell the story without, you know, and we're going to get later to, later we're going to get to the controversy. And you know, we didn't hold anything back. I even had a friend of mine who's a prosecuting attorney said, you know, you did this like a case, Jsu. You addressed everything. So no one can critique this and say, oh, you left out such and such. You're biased, you know. And I put everything in as much as I could, except for the, I didn't put the flying saucer stuff in, and the iridescent domes, and I didn't put in the Baraka. But I have, if you go to the YouTube, which will be on your resources packet, you will see in the resource button, in there is going to be all the information, the YouTube channel, and you'll listen to Mark Holmes. Mark Holmes was working at the Baraka Center along with a whole lot of other people. And there's Polly Sanderson. And again, like I wanted to tell you about the things that I was noticing is people were saying, oh, you know, what about this country and this country and this city and this city? Well, I want to go back to Miami. There was so much footage out of Miami. And JR pulled about 3, 4, I don't know, 3 staff members out of Miami plus a whole bunch of people. You know, you're going to see Irwin, you're going to see Howard, you're going to see Taylor Monroe, you're going to see Rama, you know, so there was something going down in Florida. Aside from that, that's where I was raised. And maybe he was putting light columns in there for me so I can just end up in California with him. But I found that to be so. And I found London. London was very powerful. And these vortex centers spread out. And different people would end up leading the charge for different cities. But I wanted to show the beginnings and not get caught up on what city I left in and what city I left off. But here, Candy's talking about, there's Mr. Hinkins. And the photos are really amazing in how they show the different, whatever JR was going through and changing and evolving, photos. The photos showed it. And if you notice, I think I got this from David Rayner, but and when we did Spiritual Warriors, but I decided to, sorry, it's 5 in the morning. I decided to thematically show photos. I mean, so show flowers. In every interview, there should be flowers. So that's the theme: flower, beauty, blossoming, the beginning, spring. See, flowers. So you'll see, like, I hid things as a co-director. Every interviewer has a flower. Now, this is the Hinkins family, and the Davies family, Elda's family. Myrtle Glines. So Jared was influenced by this lady, Myrtle Glines, and very interesting. And that's where I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he would end up being up in Finhorn, working in another organization. But, you know, Jared was metaphysically, you know, hunting. And let me see what he's saying right here. Robert Waterman. Now, the Quimby Center, Neva Del Hunter seemed to be a very interesting place for JR to gather, meet, pick up Jack Reed. Look at the flower. Jack Reed and Robert Waterman, and kind of like, yeah, JR talks about the Metaphysical conference. And it's kind of like when, you know, when I think about all these spiritual type people that were trying to find each other. I mean, today, everybody, you know, you go down to the corner, there's a yoga store, there's a yoga center. Everybody takes it for granted now of spiritual jargon, you know, or people know things. They know more than they tell. But it seemed like back then, that's Muriel Engel, who would end up taking JR, and they would end up meeting Sai Baba. That's a whole other great 8mm footage. But basically, so this is, let me see what she said. I really like her testimonies. I mean, I call them. And the other thing too is, I found in interviewing everybody, it's like, I just was, you know, when JR's telling you one thing, it's JR telling you one thing, and you can believe him or not, or you could actually doubt it. But then when you interview a solid 40 people, I've interviewed over 100 people, but solid 40 people saying the same, I mean, they're all saying the same thing, but the 40 are I'm kind of throwing that number out, are the people that were there in the beginning, and they're still with him now. And they don't, you know, falter or change or doubt anything. Their story is still the same, as JR's seminars have always been the same, you know. Very interesting. And here's Muriel. So, and a lot of the 8mm was spliced together in different cities. I like looking at the equipment, you know, cassette tape recorders. One of the things that I found, this is the same suit Jack Reed said he wore when he met JR, and when JR married him. It was kind of funny. The first interviews, Jack Reed brought his original suit. What I've also noticed about JR, and that's what he's instilled in me, is the ability to adapt to the technology and keep moving on. So if you look at the tables, I like looking at the surrounding, the composition of where JR is at, or anybody. And you look around and you start to see, oh, look at that cassette tape, or look at that reel-to-reel. I mean, those were the happening things. I mean, see this microphone, it kind of hangs. And that's Uba Green. This is, again, Aaron Thacker with a little bit of a flicker. Michael's son. And, you know, people, I'm going to be very honest about it, you know, and JR gave me the approval, is, you know, we couldn't cut the old staff people out. And people are like, oh, yeah, but they, you know, they turned on JR, they left. And I'm like, you know what, at the moment that things were being photographed, and at the moment of the archival footage that is really the property of MSIA, they were in tune, they were aligned with the spirit in JR. So I use it. And frankly, I think it's all beautiful, and they were all beautiful at the time, as we all were. And they went off and did their own thing. But I have no judgment. I neither knew them nor got caught up in any of that. I'm strictly a director right here, and I really wanted to tell the story that these were the people that helped, you know. And I love this footage. This, I can't think of the oh, this is 8mm, I think. Yeah. This is black and white, Super 8. And some of the stuff was a video type of camera. That's the original suit, look. Jack Reed. Now this man I did research on, he died eventually, a couple years after the interview with Jerry, died of cancer. I love this guy. Star power. And I love what JR is saying. You know, JR was on fire right here. And you could tell that you know, I think around this time his mom and dad died. And he might have been in India already. But he was on fire. And I think this interview was done in New York. Star power guy was out of New York. And there's Ruben Paris. I remember when I first got in the movement, I was going over Lawrence Caminetti's house to do sharings and JR seminars. And Ruben was there. And it was very funny. Like, he sold me a tape, and he goes, "Do you want to buy a tape of silent SEs?" So I bought it. The whole tape was silent. Like, no sound was coming out of it. So I would just play it. Like, silent SE tapes. He was hilarious. But he was an amazing guy. I loved him. And I think the truth is, but we don't have the documentation, you know, once again. So I can't go there, is Ruben's sister, who I think her name was Rebecca. JR was going in Florida to her house to do seminars and sharing. And then eventually it went to Rama's house, Lee Clausen. And the full interview of Lee is amazing. So there, I think that's Rebecca. So that's her right there. So Lee Clausen was telling stories of like going surfing with JR. And you know, JR would say, "Hey, you know, you can hang, but you better get a job." So that's Mark Holmes. And Rick Green, look at that. I love how we have footage on people and then we go to present. And there's the flower. And, you know, they're still alive, thank the Lord. And, you know, couldn't get Ruben now, but really glad whoever filmed this, Now Productions, that. And by the way, the people that did the sound for everything I do and want to do from here on in is Dane Davis at Dane Tracks. And Dane Tracks got an Oscar for, Dane Davis got an Oscar for Matrix. And I find all those guys are really, they love JR and they love his work, and they're really sincere about doing great work. Matt, a whole lot of, you know, Kimberly, Francine, a lot of the Dane Tracks crew really took on this movie. It was 3.5 hours. It's like doing 2 movies. And we did the final mix at Warner Brothers, which was really a kick. It cost money, but I mean, you want to do things right. That's Uba Green. The sound in this is amazing. And it's not, you know, Jurassic Park 5.1, but it's, you know, they had to clean a lot of the dialogue and make the dialogue mixed with the music and effects. The dialogue has to be, you know, JR's dialogue, and it's very hard to make it all sound on the same level. Things that he recorded from 1968, 1956. You're going to see in the Blu-ray, never before heard voiceograph. It's a 45 record. Ooh, let me see if I've got it. Yeah. Let's divert. Oh, that's JR's father, Parley Hinkins. He was dying at that time. So this is a record, 45 record, 1956. JR would, you could go to the Coronet, you can go to these drugstores type places, and you go into a booth and you record a little message for whoever you want. And so JR recorded a Merry Christmas type telegram to his mom, 1956, Irma. So we keep it nice and restored. Barbara Whelan's done a great job at keeping things preserved, along with Now Productions. We have an amazing vault. So anyway. So here we go, the graphics, the beginning of the movement of spiritual awareness. I wanted to... yeah, it's Light Castle stuff. The other thing is going to the vault. I want to sort of shoot out some names. This is, so here in Florida, by the way, I went to actually Rama's old house, and it was in mint condition. I met the guy, and I had said, hey, can I come in? His name is Jim. And he goes, who are you? And I go, well, I'm a friend of Rama. She used to live here. He goes, oh, yeah, yeah. She has a rock back here. It was in Coral Gables, Coconut Grove. And I went to the backyard, and there was a big rock, and it says MSIA, the year, and Rama. And the whole thing looks the same except for the shaggy rug. So this is Ralph Johnson, kind of cool stuff. That's Dane Davis's office while we were mixing. So people like Near, who works for Now Productions, really spent hours and hours and hours pulling tape, and then, you know, capturing it, putting it on a hard drive, and giving it to my editors. I think I clocked 77 terabytes of, and that's not all of it. That's all we can handle to look through. We pulled 77 terabytes. Put it in all these hard drives because there is no 77 terabyte hard drive. So we had an average of 3 terabyte drives. We had a lot of them. And Near would go down to the vault. Gene would go down to the vault. Phil we would use to look up and cross-reference with Barbara Whelan in the database to go look for stuff. And we would find stuff that was never dated or never tagged, and it was amazing going through the vault. You think that you have something categorized, and it's not. It's just been sitting there, and oh my God, we found something new. So still, still today, there's things that you dig through, and you think that you categorized it, and there it is. There's something new. So look at all the 3D. It's the 8mm Jeannie Ford. So Chuck Moore was the other one that I was trying to think of the name. Chuck would, God bless him, he worked really hard, and he'd be out late at night trying to get what we needed in the morning. So here's more of the 8mm. These are called chapter breaks. We got 36 of them. We should be on iTunes by the time you get the Blu-ray, hopefully. And, you know, we colored it. We did our, the cameraman's Thor Wixon. I did a lot of the camera, too, for interviews. The better cameraman was Thor. He taught me a lot. And the DIT, the digital intermediary, the person that grabs the data out of the camera and then transcodes it into this. His name is Shiblon, Wixon. And I met them when we were doing the Wayshower. They were born Mormon, really sweet guys. And they understood JR, and they understood what we're doing. And they're really good guys, and I trust these guys. So this was a lot of restoration also on the video to make it 16 by 9. Because JR's videos are usually 4 by 3. You know, and it was just hours and hours of looking through this. Now, there you can see Rick Edelstein, by restoring the, this is video, but the other stuff was 8mm. By restoring that, and it was lit a little bit, you're able to see some of the stuff that, you know, in 8mm, it's great, but we don't have an 8mm projector here, so you need to basically blow up film and then see and make it look like this, digitize it. So there was a lot of things, especially for me. I mean, I'm relatively young in the movement. I came in 87, or I don't remember, 86 or 87. I don't know. 86. Yeah, 1986. So you can see some of the rain in the background. Again, flowers. But I love this photo. But you know, oh, Betty Bennett. Betty Bennett is a hero. Now, today's photographer and graphic, another great man, and I have some of his photos here, is David Sand. But Betty Bennett was, and we got a lot of Lori Lerner's photos too. Betty Bennett and a lot of other people that, you know, let us have. But Betty Bennett was an amazing, I mean, she saw things, photographed it, and put it away. And the categorizer, the genius, is Barbara Whelan, hands down. I love my relationship with Barbara. I mean, it's the kind of thing where if the editor needed, hey, can you talk about when JR was talking about? Okay, so now we're going into the deep teachings. The first version of the movie is about 2 hours. And then we just had to go deep because I wasn't going to, by the way, I love the old man in front of the discourses. I wasn't going to just brush over and make it sort of a shallow, oh, look, this is a great man and he was a great teacher. There's Laren Bright. I wanted to show you the teachings without making this a type of recruiting arm, you know, to grab people and get them in the movement because, wow, you know, we need to do that. And these are these light studies that JR would do with people. I really liked. I wanted to show as much as I could, blow by blow, about what JR did. I love this guy. This guy had his own radio station, and he's in the 8mm. Now here's the 8. That's the kind of style that we ended up doing, me and Josh, is whatever again, the old staff guys, there was always a photographer that would shoot stills and then the 8mm, and they tended to match. Anyway, my relationship with Barbara was such that I can email her anytime and go, hey, JR, is there anything on, you know, we got, this, it looks like it's this guy's, JR is his roommate. It looks like this guy's his roommate. Does he talk about roommates? Well, then she would send me transcripts of like tons of seminars. Then I would go to Phil, get me this. Chuck Moore would go down to the vault. Next thing you know, we have all that stuff. By morning, in a hard drive, Near would come in, get coffee, and would just be capturing all the stuff. Running it through the Teranex. Teranex is a type of compressor, fixer-upper, and would able to give me the right cadence, because everything is 24 like film. flower. Now, Muriel was Chuck Moore's mom. She went to India. She's got great stories of India. And she ended up talking about JR's Myrtle Glines. That's that lady. And in JR's personality degrees, he studied with her that would eventually become his light readings. So you could see the beginnings. JR just did, he got the energy and he got the spirit, but he also was smart methodically. It's actually a like when you talk about DSS, one of our courses, DSS, MSS, there is spiritual science, and JR was back then doing spiritual science. Now in the DSS, in the classes, with a bunch of great teachers like Polly and Deborah Martinez, and I don't know who's doing it now, but it's all about scientifically putting it down so you track and trend, and then you let the divine come in, but you're able to also lay down scientifically what went down. I mean, Irwin here. Yeah, Irwin talks about his light reading. I mean, look at Irwin with Andra Carasso. I mean, JR was able to, I got the tail end of a light reading. By the time I got light readings, it's just having dinner with JR and at Denny's, and he kind of pretty much tells you what your downfall is and what to focus on, what to stay away from, the areas to stay away from, and the areas that you want to promote more of. And I put Michael's son. It's coming up. JR gave him some kind of ordination, and the whole mystical traveler, on how you get the mystical traveler consciousness. In my opinion, the scientific part is JR gives you more ordinations. You're ordained, this way and that way, and you get more and more titles in ordination, and then you're the mystical traveler. So I wanted to show how Michael's son, who's not involved physically with us right now, how he got some ordination that JR gave him. But it was very interesting how JR was sharing keys at the time. It was kind of who can eventually handle it, and eventually John Morton got the keys. Okay, so here's Florida. The 8mm stuff was off the hook in Florida. And I went to that house and I photographed. Today it's the same, Coconut Grove. The house today doesn't have shaggy rug, but I mean, those homes are made out of coral rock. Thing's gonna last forever. The kitchen is exactly the same here. So for me, it was great to go back, and I don't know, it's a little bit of like 50-year difference-ish. I was, imagine Jesus Christ or Moses or Muhammad, and the people that knew him or know them, they're able to go back and visit in a much in a much lesser time, not waiting 2,000 years. Oh yeah, Jesus hung out in this cave, and it's fresh. It looks the same when Jesus was in there, because it was only like 40 years ago, as opposed to waiting 2,000 years. And you go to Israel and you can't. There's like 3 different churches, and there's 3 different holes, and there's all sorts of different locations in where Jesus was. He was crucified here, inside, outside. Nobody knows. Everyone thinks they know. But this is all 8mm. This is apparently up in Florida. JR was doing workshops. Now this is that TV show that I tell you that camera that was tethered to some machine.
You know how you'd say, well, how do you tell JR is a real teacher? Well, the funny thing is, I couldn't tell.
See the flowers? No, it's like, I'm going to lean back a little bit. Yeah. This is where I edit, somewhat. I think you can see this. Yeah. I love Howard's interviews. So this is JR with Rama on the second floor. I went to this bedroom. It's exactly the same, obviously not with Rama's materials on there. But I mean, I find it very cool that you know, there's no 8mm of this in Philadelphia, Chicago. These are all great cities that JR would end up going to, and even Australia. I found a few stills, but stills, I got to tell you, photos are just as good. Photos tell me so much. The way Betty Bennett was able to capture, I love this guy was interesting, and then the radio station WKAT. But photos also capture so much. So this is like, I think, where Edgar, Michael Sun, and somebody else, they would end up being staff from here. I mean, Greg Stebbins, Philip Anthony. So this is Rama's house. It's really cool. And then eventually, and you know, I got to tell you, it was really cool. Paul K and I went to New York, and I was guessing I can get Peter Max. I got to tell the Peter Max story. It was great. Peter Max is this amazing artist who painted Rama and then painted that beautiful design of a seminar that JR was having. So basically, there he is, Peter Max. So I couldn't get this guy. I was going to New York. I wanted to interview. I'll bring the camera. Is there any way? Anyway, I kept getting, oh, you know, you got to take it slow. I kept talking with different people that would run into him. Keep getting to run around. I believe in just asking somebody directly. I don't play around. So anyway, I called Larry King. Larry King, because of Rama, we got the interview quickly, and he did it for free. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And then, you know, Peter Max did it for free. A lot of people did their stuff for free. It was really cool. But I asked Larry if he could do me a favor, and I would owe him one. Whatever, like I'm Frank Sinatra. I said, can you get me Peter Max? And he goes, sure. And he gives me his phone, Peter Max's phone number. Zoe got it. So I got it. I call Peter Max, and Peter Max is like, who's this? And I'm like, look, it's Jsu Garcia, and I figure they don't know who I am. They probably don't know who JR is, but they know Rama. So I said, oh, this is the old DuPont Plaza Hotel. It's no longer there. And there's an Epic hotel in Miami, and that's what they built in that area. It's no longer there. Cool area. Anyway, and that's Larry King. That's Larry King right there in the 8mm. We didn't really know it until now, until when we restored it, and he introduces JR. It's unbelievable. So, Larry gives me Peter Max's phone number. I call Peter Max. I drop the name Rama Fox, and he remembers. And I said, look, I would love, first of all, I need your permission on if I could use your art for the movie. And he goes, well, why don't you interview me? And I'm like, I'd love to. He goes, okay, come to my office, 8 o'clock, whatever. So Paul K comes, and he helps me, and we interview Peter Max. It was amazing. And he got really possessive about his artwork, and then I mean, he's got like a bunch of lawyers. It's so ridiculous. You want people to clearly it's a documentary. I'm not going to profit on his artwork. On top of that, he made the art for JR. So it's like, who owns it? Come on. So the lawyers were cool. We signed off on it, and Peter was nice, and but very generous. And Peter told me great stories. There's Nick Brown. Peter told me great stories. Peter Max told me great stories about the Beatles calling them up, and the Beatles had Maharishi, and Peter had his own guru. And it was at a time where gurus were coming into the U.S. creating yoga. You know, now everyone's doing yoga. So, flower. So these are articles and photos. Now what we did, see the background, no matter how many photos we keep flipping in the center, I did the background. I put all JR's photos out, as many as I could, and I made it a background. Now, I love JR's, this is one of my best photos I've seen. Whoever took the photo really captured. I love what JR says here.
Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, and I think there was conversations between Brutus and Cassius, and they said there's a time in the tides of the affairs of man, if you take it on the crest, it leads on to your destiny, and if not, you're lost. And we feel that we have hit a crest with this movement, and we're moving right on the crest of a powerful wave that we call the wave of divine love from the ocean of love and mercy.
I mean, he really tells you. You know, and I love Shakespeare. Me and JR used to always read Shakespeare. But that's from Julius Caesar. And it's basically a quote about riding the wave, being on the zone. And JR is basically saying right then and there they were on the zone. And this thing propelled them forward. And JR rode it like a wave, as a surfer that he is. Yeah, I'll never know that. That's a weird city. But basically, oh yeah, now we're going into the human. I find this section to be very interesting because JR basically predicted the crises, you know, the oil crises, and this is David Allen, and how he went ahead and got a gas station and I mean, look at the technology then. I mean, this is, look at tires, and this was all cool. We pulled this after the fact. When we restored the 8mm, we're seeing JR's sister doing the sit-up. Well, that's Polly too. I love that background. But these photos, you know, we just digging through. That was his, I think, Baldwin Park house. I'm just sitting here watching it with you, coming up with things. That's Ted Drake and the Chimati moped. That was an interesting detour we took because JR was also developing, hey, you know, how to pay bills and still be of service. So, you know, people were entrepreneurs. Jim Matson fixing cars, having a gas station with gas, having your own travel agency, selling gadgets. I mean, I loved it. I think where Baraka comes from too is I remember when I first came into the movement at the Insight 2101 building, there was a store. You can buy a lot of stuff there, you know. Let's see where we're at.
We got the gas station because we wanted to have big tanks full of gas. So
that's David Allen now. Look at those cars. Okay, so the limousine was an interesting thing. So when I came in, the limousine was kind of trashed a little bit, but some guy decided to put a sunroof on it. But basically, JR gave me the permission to sell it. And there's the Chamati. And I'll never forget Gene. Gene does some research and says, "Oh yeah, you can't get more than $3,000-4,000 on it." Some rats had gotten into it, so we cleaned it out. And I asked JR, "Hey, let's eBay it." And I asked JR, "What should we price it at?" And JR goes, $17,000. I was like, "Wow, that's a lot." Actually, the guy called us. He wanted to buy it. JR said it was fine, but the actual car, the actual type of car, and this guy's a collector, is worth over 100 grand. So JR was right. It was a very expensive car. So this guy promised to restore it because of the sunroof. I love this India footage. And I think the car, JR's car, is sitting in some museum. Chrysler Museum, because it was a Chrysler. And he was right, like the Pope had one or two of them, and the President, Lyndon Johnson or something like that. Now, I really love the footage here. If you could see that JR has a beard in some and then he doesn't in other takes, is because JR went to India several times. When I interviewed Mark Holmes later on, after I finished the movie, he told me he was in the trip. He was on the trip. So this is a great photo. And I think Nathaniel said he went to India, and when he looked at the footage, he goes, "Yeah, it's just like it." Literally, you can scratch and sniff and smell and feel like you're in India. I think, again, the old staff members shooting all this on 8mm, there was some great instincts to do that. Because this is, you don't have this, today. Yeah, look at his whole this whole area. It's funny. There's a little baby that's nude right there. You can see the baby's butt. Yeah, that makes the movie rated R. And then, so there's JR, like with Sai Baba, with no beard. I love how we're seeing him do the miracle. Yeah, I love this stuff. That looks like Harrison Ford. But I found the meaning of the bottom line. I thought about why we put Sai Baba in here is, regardless of whether JR would see Sai Baba again, I felt even when I moved in with JR, he was always talking about Sai Baba. And I feel that the connection with Sai Baba, JR and him had this untalked about, unspoken relationship that only gurus have with each other. I mean, look at that.
And we were on the bus going through town, and these children with no shoes coming up and
But look how well the camera lights the outside, you know. This is what film, it's 8mm film, you can't beat it. And that's JR. I mean, whoever was shooting this was just great photography. And the restoration of it, Cinelicious. We love you. We also paid you a lot of money, but whatever. It was good. I mean, look at the colors. They graded it. Now watch the still photography, how we matched the 8mm with the still photography. Look at that. I mean, it's awesome. I think that's going into the facility. His I love this. Jared's barefooted. I mean, the great things about this movie is you see things that you didn't see before. And frankly, this movie's a lot like a discourse. You know, you're reading the discourse, and then when you read it again, I had to watch this movie, you know, a lot to make sure that there are no glitches, that there are no problems. Sally Kirkland, look at the flower. We made this up because the article was correct, but we don't have the newspaper that she's talking about, so we put a photo. So that was apparently Sally Kirkland's wedding, which later we'll show you the 8mm that we found. These are David and Ross, John Rogers' nephews. So the London scenario was kind of cool because I love London. You know, Nick Brown being in there. And also what was very interesting, Carol Nathan. But it's during the mod era, you know, it was very interesting. I like shooting with no light. But this is at the, in London when I was there. And then we went to the flat where PK lived, and we filmed the flat now. So when they're talking about, when PK's talking about the flat, we cut to it. So there's Nick Brown, flowers. You guys still awake? Yes. I might take a break and then I'll come back so we can put it on pause in case it's too much for you guys. So I really like the cars that were there in London. I think it's Hyde Park. Jared's walking through Hyde Park. You know, and you find out, you know, especially when I traveled with JR, that he had already been there. It looks like JR never took you anywhere he didn't already go. That's what it feels like, based on some of the stuff I've seen. And
in 1971, and everybody told me I'd never find anywhere to live, and I found a
so here we went to St. John's Wood, not far from Apple, the Beatles place. So it was really cool to shoot that, because I was like, wow, that was real. That was like you looked up at the flat, and at the place that Jerry was there with Natalie Franks and PK. Flowers. So what I find, I really like this because that's PK. Look at his nose. And there's JR back there, and he's kind of observing staff doing an ordination. So these are the stills. This is the still that matches the 8mm. There it is. Natalie Franks. Look at the TVs. But yeah, I found that London was very revealing. Now this is out in Bovey Castle, one of my favorite places, Bovey, and I interviewed Natalie. Look at the recorder. So, I mean, you'll always see a recorder. I mean, they did a great job at keeping that. I love these photos. Let's see what she says.
On some level, but it was funny. That really was where
I like the Hyde Park. Look at that. I think this is King's Road. So we are going to take a break. I'm going to stop at, we called it the Light Castle. Welcome back. Welcome back. We are going to continue. It's we called it. So this is the chapter break. We called it the Light Castle. You're going to see Candace here. I love the artwork. The one thing that I loved about going through this is we saw a lot of the paperwork, you know, really nice print that was just done by simple things. That's the Light Castle. And the graphics that throughout the years in MSIA, there were a lot of artistic people that, from artists playing music during sharing to artistic people that were making nice little designs, especially the person that made the designs for the front of the discourse with the old man and the mountain. See, look at these designs. It's Randy Garver. There's my little, I like these little soul travel pamphlets. That's the marlin that JR caught. And right now, I had the marlin for a while up at Windermere. Oops. I had the marlin, and it is now in the hands of Julie Lurie. Julie Lurie now has the marlin, in case people care about that. Can you hear me? Pretty good, pretty good. Test, test. There we go. And these were the, I guess it was a lot of entertainment, cabaret stuff at the Light Castle. But I love this studio shot here. And look at Polly. Our Business is Soul Transcendence, the next chapter. And I guess JR's name, Hindi name was Shri John Roger. This is that Star Power interview. Henry Conyers. I never met him, but this is really nice. This is actually a video, like a black and white video. And he was doing, so this is that video I was telling you where Laren Bright had a little TV show. Kind of like a straw hay background. An interview between two ferns. That's a joke for those people that know that. And the look is great. It's just, we restored it. That video had been sitting around doing nothing for a while. So I love these little box 676, Rosemead, California. And one of the things I tried to get is, you know, JR's. I know with me, it's the food that JR loved to eat, and a lot of the photos are around dinner. That's JR's sister and family, and the kids and nieces and nephews. I was saying that a lot of the 8mm in photos are around family and dinner tables and restaurants. I think you can hear a little bit of the volume. I think that's San Francisco. We found some really nice San Francisco San Francisco 8mm, Phil Danza Brook. And it's coming up. We took about, I think it's 45 minutes to 50 minutes to an hour of just deep into the teachings. And, you know, clearly I've got intellectual and people like David Allen and Russell Bishop were able to articulate in a physical language what the traveler does. So I picked them. I mean, I'm sure anyone else could. I love this photograph. It's by Larry Whitaker, I think. Reminds me of a Star Wars poster. We have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of easel material, stuff that he wrote on paper. Some of it we use as beautiful 3D graphics. Now this is the same, it's a different interview, but same camera, but in black and white. I think either this one was bad color and we just decided to do it in black and white, but it had the same color as the last one. I think this is around the time the technology for videos were being developed. So it was phasing out 8mm and Super 8. This is at the Pasadena Arena or Auditorium. I think you could still see, yeah. I'm looking over there because I could see the camera. There you go. Now I fisheye lensed it so that we can all be included in this. This is my thinking tank. Back here I wrote Blu-ray DVD 2014. Love to you, JR. And I don't know if you guys know, but I'll bring out a camera. This is a 16 millimeter camera. And oh, see these images? These images we ended up leasing and buying. It's from a famous movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it was in the vault as a 16 millimeter. Very popular short film, and I went ahead and restored it. I gave a copy to the girl that produced it, and we took a clip and licensed it. I think that's a conference of something in Pasadena. But yeah, these little cameras they used, the guys. I still couldn't find the camera that JR used on the road. I tried to. You see my shirt? It says Mystical Traveler. So these are more 8 millimeter footages that we restored. And we still, I mean, we had so many that we could line it up in the movie. And some of these photos were phenomenal. Now here, we're going to get into the realms. And Aaron Thacker, through talking with him, you know, it's fun to be creative and have the money to do it with. But these realms, from physical, astrocausal, mental, etheric, soul, and beyond, everything's flat, one-dimensional, the way JR is explaining it. And I was talking with Aaron, and I was our graphic artist. And see, this is a beautiful chart. And with the sounds that Dane Davis would do, who did Matrix, and Aaron doing the visuals, I thought we could get really close to experiencing it inside. You know, of course, it's not. But it's pretty damn good.
Labeled the astral realm. In the astral, it's pink, and the sound is the roaring of surf.
So you can hear.
And this realm is one that we enter into often when we're in a daydream.
So I really like I mean, it took 3 months to do this, and it set us back a little bit. Sometimes ideas can slow you down. Sometimes you have to be careful what you create because it does cost money and it takes time. Look at the little vapors. We definitely wanted to give that background space. JR like this. He definitely, and everything that we would put in this movie, JR would approve. You know, I wouldn't do anything that he didn't like or didn't want. So we showed it to him in pieces, and then when we finally screened it last year at conference, I think he stayed for both screenings. And since then, it's 2014. This year, we went to Mar del Plata in Argentina. The Borges, Marcela Borges and Juan Cruz. She's very famous. She's like the Meryl Streep down there. And Mar del Plata was the Sundance in the 50s. It was a film festival that was developed by Perón. Eva Perón's husband, the military guy. And everybody flocked to the beaches of Mar del Plata, Argentina. It's below Buenos Aires, and everybody was there. You could see people like who's there? I saw in the video they showed old 8mm video, and it was Errol Flynn was there, Paul Newman, things like that. So they honored JR. They gave him a citizen of Mar del Plata, and the councilman of Argentina gave him the keys. It was all, it's not exactly the name of the titles, but they gave him 3 awards and gave him a medal and gave him a coin. And they were very sweet the way they took care of JR, and they really, we opened the film festival with me and Juan Cruz, his mom, and I think Heidi Banks was there. We were all walking the Fellini-esque type festival. And then the film also just finished in the Havana Film Festival in New York. So it was great. It was really good. Now we're back with, I think, the interview between two ferns with Larry and Bright. See, this is a little bit on Laren's part. You can see that's probably what the color should have been like, a little bit better. There's my flower. I really like the background, how the, geez, we used a lot of the interviews were at 2101 in the Lux Hotel. Now here JR's talking about the cosmic mirror, and again we went back with Aaron Thacker, and we did this. We wanted to look down into the mirror and then up. I mean, what was that? This is the lazy way of doing it, instead of doing SEs, spiritual exercises. Our wording for doing meditation. So these are all these clips throughout the years. And mind you, this is all video that we transcoded so it can fit on the big screen. So this is, now we're going into the materials. I think we're doing, we broke through, our business is soul transcendence was the tag for the chapter break. So notice that it's always a clue of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going in here and we go through all the soul realms and the realms, and now we're going to be talking, that's Prana. So now we're going to be going into, I love JR with the beard, so cool. So these are, I think those are a lot of photos from Prana, but then now we're going to be going into yawning a little bit. We're going to be going into the mystical traveler, the preceptor, and what those means according to JR.
The nature of this world and the nature of the physical world seems to be one that covers up or can very easily hide the more subtle and sublime parts of who we really are. I think we have access to that. So the idea of transcending these levels is not to deny them and not to say they're awful, but the ability to be able to transcend, meaning I need to be able to lift up, let go, and expand.
So that's David. when we were interviewing David Allen and Russell Bishop and Polly and Candace and Randy Garver and Greg Stebbins, I would ask them, tell me about initiations. That's above Mandeville Canyon here. There was a fire and a flood up here. And there's a lot of 8mm of JR really helping to clear the canyon and not lose the house, basically. This is up in Lake Arrowhead. There was a lot of 8mm of like Randy and JR and Greg Stebbins kind of looking for new places. I think this is when they were hunting for, just before Prana, a retreat center. And then even before that, then they settled and found Windermere. Let me see where he's at.
To the Lord you find cause. Chanting the spiritual exercises builds an energy bridge into the higher levels of life.
So now we're talking about chanting the hue and the initiatory tones.
The best spiritual exercise is that one that takes you to the heart of God.
It's doing something active. It's chanting.
Initiatory tones. And I thought Polly here gave a great explanation of it. See, I really just had to get out of the way and film people that have known JR and know what they're talking about. So, so these were 8mm, and you can see people in the dark. I mean, it was just really good. The film is amazing, and then of course, it's it was also the restoration of the 8mm. There's like little little fingerprints on my stuff, but I don't think you can see the fingerprints, so we're good. So this is it. We're just gonna sit here and I'll remember what the heck I did 2.5 years ago. But basically, oh, this is had to be the Berkeley house that JR did seminars in. That person that just walked by entered the seminar through the window. And there's Mark Darrow. The interview between two ferns. Zach Galifianakis, look it up on YouTube. But this is really cool. I think Laren will tell you he tried to do this TV show and it was for free, and then they sold products. On the kind of like on one side of the screen or the other is where would they do with these little commercials to sell holistic foods and things like that. That's David Allen. It's kind of cool. People's hairdos were different, and women wore hot pants and jeans, and it's very 60s. You can feel it. There's Eric de Galdillo, and I think that's Denise Lemire. I love this photo here. So if you know, and again, even though David Allen and all them, I asked them questions about what they think sound current and etc. is like. It's going to be JR basically finishing it up. So there's David Allen kind of like giving you a little bit more details, but astrocausal mental etheric soul, you kind of did it upside down. Okay, I need to, let me see. Oh yeah, let's just wash this. I just can't stand fingerprints. There we go. Ooh, that's pretty good. Apple makes these glass. Okay, can you guys see that? Yeah, there you go. So that's the red camera that we're shooting on, that we shot this on, and that camera is going to run out of battery soon. I'll do another break later. So yeah, this is where Candace is talking about getting initiated by JR for Christmas. I like the simplicity of that shot. Baldwin Park, Christmas with JR. Awesome. And that's that hat that I think he uses when he was doing the bobsleigh. He's sleighing down a hill. But I think you get, yeah, I think this is Mandeville now. Or is that Baldwin? Yeah, there's a whole lot of other 8mm with PK and the Prez. I think you can see them there. It's kind of like low light, but you'll see JR here, and then I think John's sitting next to JR. Or Philip Anthony. That's Polly. A lot of these 8mm didn't have sound either. So there's John right there next to JR. And we're going to take a break real quick. All right, we're picking it up from The Blessings Already Are. I had to go look at, it's terrible. You know, you spend 2.5 years on this and then you see a little mistake. But that's the way it is. You see little, every time you see the movie, you go, oh my God. But this is something that nobody sees because you won't have an eye for it. You will if you saw the movie like 10 times. But I've seen the movie, I don't know, over 30, 40 times. And so you look for little inconsistencies. The composition should be the same. But if it jerks up, then something's up. So I just looked at it. I love these little pamphlets again. And I think this is... Dave Morton gave me some 8mm that he found. I couldn't believe it. It was amazing. So we had photos of this one conference of love, I think, at the something at Auditorium Alhambra or something like that. And see the stills here? Well, that's Dave Morton's 8mm. It was great. So he actually, I couldn't believe it. So he said, oh yeah, I've got some 8mm, and so I developed it, and it matched the photo again, keeping that style in the editing, that if I have the 8mm that could match the still, let's put it together. That's his 8mm, amazing. And I think it was the same one that Henry Conyers was doing the interview in. There are the stills, look at that. That's more 8mm, David Morton's. There were a lot of people that contributed. I could do that a little bit now while I'm, you know, it's in the back of the movie, all the credits of people that help. I mean, it's endless. But the archiving and the scanning of all the photos took a toll on Barbara and Mark Lurie and the press, because I stole Barbara Whelan from them, from other jobs that she had to do. But basically, a lot of volunteers. Timothea Stewart, I might not be able to remember everybody, but tons of volunteer. Claudia, Zoe, a lot of volunteers, and I'll get to it. That I think Michael Peck, a lot of people came by to help, because Barbara Whelan would find the photos, but it would need to be scanning, and the average scanning takes about 5 to 15 minutes. Literally, I've gone through hundreds, thousands of photos, and there's thousands more that have never been scanned, and it would just take, I think it would take 10 years to really look through all that stuff. These are these football, baseball games that 8mm film was filmed by Delisle and Elda when the kids were in school playing football. I love this. I found out all the PAT trainings that we had in Israel and Egypt, PAT 4. Well, JR was already in Israel in 74 or something. There's a shot in here where it's the first time it's ever snowed in Jerusalem or something like that. And I looked it up on the internet, and it was like one of those, you know, once in a blue moon, it snowed in Jerusalem. And I love this. I mean, you're seeing Jerusalem in the 70s, right after the wars, and JR, and I don't know the historical wars, but there were several of them. You know, and it's not much more than when they took Jerusalem. I mean, so I think I got to look that up, but look at that. This is the old city, and yeah, relatively looks, but it's a little bit more sophisticated now in the way the markets are and things like that. And this is JR going through the different quarters. I think this is the Jewish quarter. But, you know, JR was there pre-PAT 4. And this is not the scouting for PAT 4. I think it was, he just went after London, or something around the India-London trip. And they did great photography. You know, the Garden Tomb now, I mean, I was there 2 years ago to film Benji Shavit, who became our guide in Egypt, in Israel. And look at these young girls. I went to Israel about 2 years ago to interview Benji and Zahava. And Zahava passed away this year. God bless her. But Zahava was Benji's wife for over 40 some years. And just JR loved hanging with them, you know. Whenever I would come to Jerusalem, Benji would throw a private family party with the kids playing piano, or at the time Zeev was alive. Zeev was JR's like favorite son, really. And Zeev loved JR, and Zeev was killed in an auto accident in India, but Benji now, I think Benji has a bunch of, I think he has Amir, his other sons, Barak and Gili, and his daughter, Ronnie. They're all grown now. But look at this. I mean, it's amazing stuff. I mean, can you see it? Yeah, you can. It looks the same, too. The stonework, and it looks better on film, though. Look at the garden. JR's colors. I mean, this all got color graded, like, it's so rich, the 8mm. This is the snow. This is Jerusalem, man. And if you Google it, look at that snow. And I think it was like, it hadn't snowed there in, I don't know, years, 50 years or some, and it was, so then I Googled it, because I kept thinking, did JR all of a sudden go from Israel when we were looking at the 8mm to Alaska? And no, it was actually in Jerusalem. And look at how wet the ground is, so that meant that it melted. I mean, you can really do a lot of, look at the fog, you can do a lot of investigative work, which ultimately you have to do if you're going to be a documentary. I don't know if I want to do another documentary. JR said that this would be the last. Maybe, I don't know. It's very hard. Look at JR going to the wall. I really love this photo. I mean, this 8mm. This is, again, this is all, the chapter backgrounds are 8mm footages of Delisle and Elda's kids. JR's nephews. Let's see where we are.
Into this level. It's a holding.
Yeah, so that was interesting, because while we were talking about spiritual things, we had to fill it up with something. So we had all this Israeli 8mm footage, and there was someone that critiqued and said, wow, there's a lot of Jewish, there's a lot of Israeli and Jewish footage. And I'm like, well, you know, I consider the entire country of Israel also, it's multi-dimensional, it's multi-ethnic. It has from Ethiopians to Arabs to Christians to everybody. So I don't necessarily think it's just Jewish. So I think JR spent equally the same amount of time in Egypt. We just didn't have the 8mm. We have, it's coming up, we have a lot of video. So, but it was, you know, holy's holy. So I think JR was always, I don't know the underlining inner work of why we went to Israel and Egypt. Maybe I do. Maybe it was for peace. For sure it was. Because the PAT-4, you know, it means peace awareness training. It means that we all went there to bring peace, because I like what Michael Fader was saying. And I actually think, and they say it's our energy that brought the energy to Israel and Egypt, that we wanted to plant our essences, our light columns into that country, because it's such a beautiful, it's a beautiful region, period. And that includes Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and that whole area, Egypt, which I love. I love all that. It's, to me, it's no difference. It's such a beautiful piece of land. That's Melchizedek. And I love the way Aaron did these graphics. And I think right now they're talking about the ordinations. This is JR's high self. We had to put the Wayshower photo in there. We love it. And
I hold the keys to Melchizedek. It's one of the 27 keys.
This is Ireland. So we're just jumping everywhere. And it's just filling it up just to give something visually while JR talks about the ordinations and the Melchizedek. So this is, you know, JR okayed this, but this is our sacred ceremony, if you will. Our sacred way of ordaining people. That's why I did it, not necessarily because it was Michael's son, but I wanted to so if Bruce Lee showed the secrets of martial arts, I wanted to show visually in the media type of format the secrets of, as best I could, of spirituality. And by the way, there are no secrets, because I think it's if you're already in that field, you know what we do, and we know what you do, and that includes all religions and all spiritual groups. There is a religiosity part, and then there is the Gnostic part. Excuse me. There's the, and I believe, again, through my eyes, I believe it's the Gnostic that I tried with the editors and JR to capture. And JR put a lot of juice in this movie. So, like a discourse. Well, so we're moving along really nicely. So this is Prana. And funny thing about it is we don't have a lot of 8mm at Prana, but we have a lot of stills. So you see a lot of stills. So I was you could tell that 8mm was kind of phasing out. So these are photos, 3500 West Adams. And it's a mansion. I mean, it's beautiful. I remember I was doing, when I was married at the time and we were separated, I did a lot of volunteer work. There was a basketball court back there, and I would play basketball with Vincent. I was Reynardo Porchili's volunteer, filing Spanish people's files in file cabinets. And it'd be like I'm trying to file Fernando Hernando Garcia de la Gonzalez. And I'd be like, yo, Ronaldo, is it Gonzalez or what do I? So that was very confusing. And you can see the people that really brought Prana from, you know, an old decrepit mansion into its prominence now. There's a lot of work. A lot of today's 60, 70-year-old guys were in their 20s. There's Vincent and PK. The first time you see them working, actually. And look at the front yard with cars. There used to be gardens in the background. And it's gone through many, many evolutions. Now I think it's the best with the labyrinth. I mean, I remember JR had his hand on everything. I mean, it was like, yo, let's put a labyrinth here. Because we had seen it in Chartres in France. And next thing you know, we have a labyrinth. And I remember that old fountain there. And I thought that the choice to make Prana Kitchen better, I call it Earth Cafe, Interior Earth Cafe. I think to make that better was so much nicer. But there was, you know, you have the old regime and the new regime. The old regime really liked old stuff. And the new regime, actually, the earthquake that kind of really hurt Prana, the restoration of Prana it was a blessing. The earthquake forced us to upgrade it, make it better, and fix things. Carol did a lot of great work. That's the wedding with, she said somebody, but you can see Sally Kirkland. And
building and property, and I take care of the gardens. I'm in charge of the aesthetics there, and I also manage the Monday night sacred tones and Friday night seminars.
The interesting part was JR's devotion to all
you know, and that's you know, when I would watch the movie, I would get so charged with this the energy that really is what we all love, and especially what's in Prana and everything. And you forget, but man, when you watch this, it's the when two or more are gathered, and I think that energy that's at Prana. A funny thing was, Zoe moved out, and she watches the movie and then she moves back in to Prana. So that was funny, because people lose in this movie. We capture the whole Dharma and the whole communal living. You know, I saw this thing in the kibbutz in Israel, and thought you could say it's socialist or whatever, but it's sort of everybody helping one another to make the greater good, which is the traveler's home, and helping each other, and having the Dharma is part of what. Look at it now. There's such a reward in doing Dharma. I know I do it here at Mandeville, and I love it. And I resent people that try to do it for me because they're trying to help. But whatever it is, whether I clean my toilet or I do whatever, I don't need a maid to clean my toilet. It's what I need. It's what I need to do to somehow. When you're doing something like that, you reflect, and you're kind of like with God, you know, doing the work. But there it is. Look how beautiful.
The beginning of the bigger seminars, was the beginning of all the video work. I don't think any of that.
So it's funny, the Now Production stuff is, the equipment is, I don't know if it was Now Productions then, but it was a production. And it wasn't so sophisticated, and that's kind of what brings the innocence and the beauty of it. Sometimes when we all get sophisticated, we lose the newness of it, you know. It's just a beautiful day here. Yeah, my thing was to, I really like showing the beginnings of things, because this is when Greg Stebbins is talking about this particular person donated Arrowhead. So we're going into Arrowhead now. This is probably my favorite part. There are some people that think it's too long, but you know, one of the things that, good or bad, wrong or right, I just made this movie, and the movie tells you when it's done. And I have, you know, I want to thank Steven Soderbergh, and I want to thank a lady called Lisa Day. You know, on the outside, I'd done 2 films with Steven. I'm not saying that we're close in any way like that, but he helped me on emails to see things a little bit more clearly. And it, you know, ultimately you make the movie and you make your choices the way that you see it. But then eventually, you know, you start it off. You're the leader. You know, Wrigley Scott calls the director a bus driver. So you drive the bus. You make sure everybody's on board, and you go from point to point to point. You get everything that the people in the bus need to get the job done. And then eventually the movie tells you what it wants. So that's what you do. You feed it. And you know when you're out of balance. when you want to insert this or insert that, the movie tells you. Obviously, then I show it to JR, and he's the one that says, cut this, keep that. But look, the original Mexican gardeners. No, but it was great. You know, back then everybody was doing everything. Now look at Randy Garver's a huge landscaper. And it's okay, my Mexican friends love me. But basically, the railroad ties, I love them. But basically, my thing that I wanted to say is, I don't know where the quote came from, but they use it in Hollywood. A film is never completed, it's abandoned. And that's what happened here. You know, this movie's not really completed. I would have kept going had I had the resources, but eventually you got to say it's done. And it is a work of art, in my opinion, and it captures everything. I think that's Zostar, Zostar, or Jared's dog. Look how clear this footage is. And we did lose an 8mm reel, one or two. So you can see that it goes in for to good to bad. But that's Rachel Jane. There's Jack Reed. Everybody's like super young. I love the cutting of the tree. You know, today you need a permit. And then arborist. That's cool. So that's my lecture to those that would critique the movie, and it doesn't really hurt my feelings at all. I got JR to bless it. I got to make it, and we finished it. But and you try your best to make it as professional as you can. But nothing's really ever completed. It's abandoned. And that really goes to what JR has always said. Like if it really takes a lot of energy from you, there goes the tree. Really takes the energy out of you if you have a lot of incomplete things. So you declare them complete. You look at the book that's by your toilet, all 9 of them, that you haven't really finished them, and you just say complete, complete, complete. And here I've got to say it's complete, even though I saw that mistake, and it bugs me. But like JR used to say, if you get a brand new car, key it, you know, or if someone does key it, leave it alone, because then you'll be off the, oh my God, it's so perfect. Let it have a spot, let it have a scratch, so you don't get all crazy about it. And I love this Michelson song. We had no audio, and our editor matched the actual song that was recorded professionally by Michael to his mouth and synced it perfectly, because there's no audio here. So I thought the restoration of that's the old standard def. It's like I didn't do it. I went into the vault and couldn't find it. But we couldn't find this to restore. So this is the original blow up in that Nancy Carter did in the 90s. It's okay. This is better. There's more 1920 by 1080 or 2K. There's more resolution. There's more resolution to capture the film, and film is better. So this is standard def. So when they were blowing up 8mm in the 80s, you can get it. You get this is okay. So basically, as technology has improved, it's caught up to film. Film is still probably the best thing that you'll ever, but it's expensive. It might come back. There's Rebecca and Nick Brown, and I love this circle. Again, I was, critiqued. Oh, it's too long, the circle, man. But I really don't care. There's Ted Drake. And there's PK. I don't know, Wendell or Wesley, I don't know them. And that. But the thing that you have to do is you have to listen to people, but you really have to not care to really do this right. Because everybody has an opinion. There's Ralph Johnson. So you have to listen, take it in. What doesn't work, throw it out. And it makes you strong. Actually, people wanted to edit that. You know, that's JR with the beard. And food to me is thematically, there's two things that are going on through this whole movie. Plants, flowers, and food. Wherever JR is, he's eating. You know, he's celebrating. And that wasn't done by any, I did the interviews with flowers, but this I didn't do by any kind of intention. It just happened. And anyway, to promote, please, people, sign up. Look at your resource on the Blu-ray and write emails or call or go on the website, msia.org, and write in to MSIA to know about the PAT trainings. The PAT trainings are peace awareness trainings, beautiful trainings. There are different kinds, 1, 2, and 3, and they can be set anywhere. Sometimes for older folks, we've set them down by Prana West, which is by Prana, by 3500 West Adams Boulevard and Crenshaw, or LA, close to Crenshaw. And this is beautiful. And if you want to take the abuse of, you know, the climate, the weather, the altitude. Some people can't handle that. I love this circle, man. And make yourself up to Arrowhead. In the summertime, it's gorgeous. And JR was always up there sharing.
So he asked me to learn that so that I could do that at the retreats. It was about energy, it was about moving energy. He's always talked about
Polly's always been the dancer. And the Tai Chi, look at the Tai Chi, she still does it. I mean, I graduated DSS, and that looks like we're still doing it. Look how amazing. And the best thing is that this film was kept, you know, nobody messed with it. And also in the restoration part, it took hours. I and the editors categorized and wrote the description of every reel so that when it went to Now Productions, it's actually in the database. That it's not just like JR Travels. It's now JR Travels Reel 1 is, it's JR and Arrowhead building showers, etc., etc. This is when they were building our cool showers outside. I think it's still like that. And JR JR is like, basically he's just saying that he did the right code for sewage and the right incline or decline. There's PK working. I mean, you can't beat this footage. That's kind of like what slowed us down in the filming is the restoration took quite a bit, man. It was a lot. It was a lot. So, and then we had to look at everything, and then looking at it, we were like, oh my God, this is such great information. And you know what, you know, with these clips, you got to put the old MSIA tunes in. So that's what we did. There's Philip Danza. It's funny because what JR is describing as having his back open to nature is because then yet put a wall there and then the fireplace. I mean, it's all in the 8mm. So it was how Josh would find it and match it. Josh was a great investigator. Now this is the old blow up in the 90s that Nancy did. So there's a big difference. And also it's going fast because it's either shot at 18 frames a second or 24 or something like that. I kept it like that because it's kind of cool. And I actually, even though it's not as good, it's great to blow it out like that. It's just film looks and things like that people like. Lord, I'd like to be clear inside. So what was fascinating for me, I don't know, here's flowers again, is JR's RV that became a touring RV and then became Now Productions headquarters, the RV. And then Rick Green bought it. And I love RVs, you know, it's kind of cool. It's Americana. Again, these are all 8mm. It looks like JR's in Lake Tahoe. You guys out there? You guys with me? Are you awake? I've had to do this in pieces, this director's commentary, because I get wiped out. So if you're doing this all in one shot, here's to you. And one of the things that I noticed in the 3-day breaks, which are pretty cool, is by then you would have noticed that up here I've put the movie. So not only are you watching it here, but you're watching it here and listening to my commentary. Again, I'm the co-director of a fabulous movie that I'm proud to have. You know, I like to say that I'm a director. I'm more of a tool that gets used. I want to be that. I don't want to think I know it all, and I don't. My heroes are JR, obviously, but Steven Soderbergh's one, John Milius, Spielberg, and Lucas, and Coppola. Those are great directors. And I've had the luck of working with, just by emails, Steven Soderbergh, and he gave me some ideas. He really, to give you an idea, look at these beautiful shots. He really blew my mind when I worked with him on a movie called Che. And the Che movie, he was using the groundbreaking camera, the red camera. And he was the first guy to be shooting 4K. And who knew what that was? It was so weird. This is Mexico. That's Ozzy de Gardillo, I think. So anyway, I'm kind of just giving you some side talk that I always want to learn, so I don't really claim to all of a sudden jump in. Although I thought that when I did Spiritual Warriors, another film that John Roger and I did. If you could see the waves, you look closely at your DVD and Blu-ray. The waves are moving in the background. I mean, this is what I love about Aaron Thacker's work. That's Australia. You know, you go to films. I've always been a film nut and an actor. I love acting. It was always fun to look at different films, get different ideas that eventually would sit in your psyche and your unconscious. And then there's John. And then before you know it, you by osmosis know what you're doing. Even when you don't know what you're doing, you know what you're doing. There's a great documentary on Donald Rumsfeld about the known, unknown, and unknowable. And John Roger has seminars on that. That's above Mandeville. You can see Mandeville down here, the pool. So Jared got above the fire, looks like the fire trail. This is probably right after the fire. And there's a lot of 8mm on JR and a lot of people. I saw the Hubbards in there and Danzas. and they were helping with the floods, because I think soon after this fire, the flood would come. And so, you know, a little bit made it too, because this is beautiful, because you get to see all of LA and the beach and down all the way to the airport. But this is, I put this in because JR's talking about how Spirit's talking to him. I think that's Mount Baldy. But we are coming, we're just going to keep barreling through. What gets to me in the movie is when we go through the explanation of the teachings. And that is really, it's amazing. It's really, you know, it kind of wipes you out. And then you get back to, I think that's JR on the train to Machu Picchu. I remember a funny story, like I wanted to do what JR do, follow in his footsteps. So I went to Machu Picchu alone. I called him from Machu Picchu, from where these guys were, where Edgar and JR were. And I said, wow, I feel really awful, JR, on the cell phone. I said, I feel really awful. I don't find the spirit. I don't find the loving. And he goes, well, hang up and go find it. So I did. And that's, I stood, there's a photo of me standing where JR stood in that hut. It's still there. This is all 8mm, once again, of Delisle and Eldest family. And it was really cool to get Dave Mason. Let me see what he's saying. Just for those of you that don't know Dave Mason, and I don't really know a lot about him, but oh, this is Select-O-Matic. Obviously, he went out with Lee Taylor Young, and he obviously, you know, and he was inspired by really the mystical traveler energy and the muse of Lee Taylor Young, and wrote Mystic Traveler. You know, Dave Mason played with Jimi Hendrix, played with Fleetwood Mac. The guy's a legend. And it was you know, it was just great, because in my 27 years, I've seen Dave come and go through, in and out. There's Muktananda. I kind of snuck that in, since Muktananda and Lee were friends. And so that's his studio. We went to Ojai, and he did this for free. I mean, what a guy. And he did this for Lee. I mean, he's a great guy. And he produced one of my songs. No sé tú, I forgot. So this is JR, and we found it, where JR kind of introduces Dave Mason. We're yet to find the material where Dave Mason sings Mystic Traveler, but he's actually singing here, let it go, let it flow like a river, let it go, that one. But apparently he went to JR's room in his office at Prana, and he sang Mystic Traveler. And I think that's the theme song of MSIA, and although I do like Michael Son's I Am the Light. There's a lot of great. In the words of a Vietnam vet, they told me that the soundtrack of Vietnam is the sound of the Huey, the helicopter. And this is the soundtrack of MSIA, are all these great songs from Michael Son, JR, and Edgar, and Dave Mason. You know, the era. I'm sure now, you know, there's different people. But I love what Aaron Thacker did here. This was our idea to, now you've watched how we have 8mm with the stills. 8mm with the stills. This is Oh, see, so these are the passports. This is actually JR's passport. So I had him get up there and take photos. So this is Paris. This is the Eiffel Tower. So you'll see that, look at that still. This photo is amazing, whoever took it. So somebody was taking stills and 8mm. This is Finhorn. And so that story where JR talks about, I don't want to go deep into it, but it's it's in the seminars. This is Japan, and then you see the footage. Obviously, JR had a energy for the island of Brittany. I mean, I would call it that, or the island. It's a beautiful island, and it has energy. And these were the energy points that would then connect to Jerusalem and down to Egypt. There's Greece. So look at these passports. I always thought JR was looking at that girl, and that girl's walking away. There's Polly. And I like the cadence of that's Rome. 3 coins in a fountain. But it's also great because you get to see how monuments were before they got, renovated. I know 3 coins in a fountain got renovated in the 80s. There's JR holding the Tower of Pisa. He's very strong. And the person that was shooting, they know what they were doing. They were shooting. They're good. This is Ireland. I really love this shot. And that's the, whatever. Look at the waves moving. So this is a montage, like a music video of the guys in Mystic Traveler playing in the background. This is Guatemala. We have the 8mm and the still. There it is. Just really, I like that style. I like that continuity, and we tried to do as much as we could with it. And Josh and those guys did a good job. This is Agape, Capri. People are saying, oh, because these guys left. Why don't you cut them out? You can't cut them out. Or you could blur them, I guess. Oh, that's India. That's I went everywhere where JR went. I went except for India. This is Easter Island. Really cool. So he kept repeating, I guess, to do something spiritual. That's Brazil. I never went there. The Falls. Great movie. JR worked with the writer of The Mission. But and this is Norway. JR looks like Count Dracula. Look. But I love those shots. This looks great. Look at the waves move in the background. And that's JR's camera. I was looking for that camera. And I love this. This composition of just empty airports. I mean, with JR, he's connected with airports. When you think of JR, I think of airports, hotels, and Denny's. So I love this. We found this. JR's making a joke.
Which they made into a famous song called
Inkadoo, inkadoo, inkadoo. JR's sense of humor is, and I couldn't capture it. He's funnier in person without the cameras on. He has a man of 1,000 jokes. I can't think of the jokes that he would say. But he was always, he still is. But when I would be down or something, he'd always come up with a funny line. And I can't think of anything, and maybe it's not appropriate right now, but there's Jack Reed with his suit again. And I love that Rick Green is amazing. Because he's in the movement from the beginning. So he was a great person to interview. Because, I don't know, I mean, I just saw the movie Son of God. That's JR and John. It's kind of funny. But I thought of if you're hanging around with Jesus and you come in, you're a new person like me, and you meet Jesus, provided he's not dead, he didn't get crucified. You get to hang out with the people that knew Jesus or knows Jesus. Jesus is a little older. Jesus is at the retirement home. And you get to hang out with the apostles, provided they weren't killed. And then you get to ask them questions. And some of them don't tell you much. But that's the whole thing, is that this movie, it kind of gives you like a visual of something, but it's not really the experience that Michael would have had with JR. I can't capture that. It's an inner experience that is beyond any kind of media capturing anything. So like all my dreams, all your experiences, or people that are new here, you're just listening to me. This is Carolyn Howe. I interviewed her mother, Norma Howe, who was the first person, and Norma passed away probably months after. But basically, if those of you out there that have kids, and those of you that are married, or that kind of love and that kind of experience that you have in such a sacred, intimate way, very hard to put up here. But you do your best. And probably see Jack Reed's eyes and how he feels. That's the best I could do. That's the best you can really do. The rest is fake. The rest is, you can't really, you know. Maybe. I just thought of Avatar, you know. James Cameron did capture a fantasy thing inside of him. And Doonesbury, I loved, you could take it two ways. You could say, oh, this is an insult that they attacked Ariana and JR, or you could say it's a compliment. I think it's a compliment. When they make fun of you at Saturday Night Live and Doonesbury, you've made it. And JR was on Doonesbury. That's a big deal. Look it up. We did Come As You Are in Another Lifetime. And JR and I used to always play acting, especially on the ranch, trying to be a cowboy. 5 years of working with JR up in the ranch got me to be a really good rider and horse handler. We broke horses without having to rough them up. We did it by imprinting them. I forgot the guy's name. There was a horse whisperer guy down in Solvang, and we used to take courses with him. And JR talks about here that one day somebody will be playing the voiceover, that someday somebody would play him in movies, and who would that be? Well, Howard Lazar got to play him in The Wayshower. And Robert Easton played him. And I wanted to thank, in case I forget, the Red Camera people. Those guys are amazing. The equipment is phenomenal. And another person that really helped in getting all this was Shablon, Thor Wixom's brother, who is more of the technical guy that gets the material out and transcodes it. You shoot it on 4K or 5K, which is a lot. It's a lot of resolution. And this is all 16:9, this is HD. I shoot 4 of these in resolution. And we get it down, reduce it down to 1. Let's see where JR is at. Here, the media arm of MSIA, we're going to start there and see if there's any more glitches, weird stuff. All right, so I love this part. This is the RV.
So that motorhome began.
The motorhome got converted into a Now Productions broadcasting headquarters. I love how there was no sophistication then. It was just people wanting to learn, young and inquisitive. What bothers me is, and I need to work on that, is the notion that we think we know everything. And what JR has always instilled in me is the curiosity and the wanting to know. You know, I want to know. I love things, so I take it apart, look at it. I love computers. There's Nancy Carter, fantastic editor. The whole Now production crew, you know, they've been sort of the, you know, protecting JR's and John's, but in the beginning was all JR stuff. It's a lot of JR stuff. And now it's John stuff. So, yeah, 25. JR's 50. But you got a lot of stuff in the vault. You've got a lot of, and you'll see the vault. You'll see how much care they took, and also the presidency to, and JR, you know, JR okayed it, is the preservation and the barcoding and the keeping track. There's Greg Fritz, Apollo 13. He really wants to fly on the shuttle. But basically, you'll see the vault is fantastic. It's it was a thoughtful move to move everything there. I think we have another one. So I mean, you know, tithing and seeding works. I mean, I could tell you that it's what pays the bills to really preserve things, archive things, and you know, Nancy Carter's talking about the 8mm. One of the things and everybody's different. Again, the 8mm captured things that JR was doing off stage, which is really fascinating. You know, we got plenty of video of JR on stage doing sharings. Look at the Magnavox. It's funny because we go through reel to reel. We go through all the stages of like people going, yeah, analog's great, and then digital's great, and then you know, we could say video's great, and then no, 4K's better, and then I personally like film, but it's such a hassle to get everything going. So it really is subjective. I mean, that camera once was great. This gear was once great, then there's better gear. It's like saying, you know, although I think Phil still has that. We still have the, I can't pronounce the name, Anheuser's or the Sennheisers. That was brilliant when JR told Phil to buy these Sennheisers. So we were the first guys broadcasting in tours. Now everybody does it. I mean, that's the thing about JR, man. He was like, he was ahead of his time. Look at all these machines. I mean, that stuff costs money, girls. That was in the day when you pop in. Look at the vault. I wanted to be like a spaceship. This was Thor doing Steadicam. And you freeze to death. You got to wear a jacket when you go into you could be found dead. It's like a raw meat refrigerator. So Aaron Thacker did all these. These are all the countries JR went to. At one point, JR did 6 seminars a week for 4 years. And notice that I'm in a hurry because you're freeze to death. So that was it. That was me bragging about Now. And we're working, you know, a lot right now with Mark Lurie and to create the DAM, data, something management. And a lot of stuff. The technology today is so much, it's revolutionized all that old stuff. You got to stay with the times or you get left behind. Things, you know, there is something to say. The world as we knew it, the world as some people knew it is over. There's now a new world. And that world is this whole tech world, man. You could 3D print things. It's insane. I can gestalt it, and I love it. And that's how you kind of, you know, you can move around, go on the internet, check things out, and you can see how you can make your own websites now. This is Insight. You know, everything in those days was brick and mortar. Now it's a website. you still got to rent the facility to do the trainings. But so here JR's talking about him and Russell and Insight.
Then we made the arrangements to actually purchase what MSI purchased the seminar, paid license.
And really, JR just really puts out the real explanation of what Insight is. And that's how I got into the movement. That's how I became a student of John Rogers. I took Insight 1 and 2. And in the 80s, I mean, for me, Insight was the kind of thing that you can, after you take it, you can tell a girl that you're having problems with and blame her and say, you need Insight. And then they would take Insight, and then both you and the girl would be so in sync with each other. Because Insight, or MSIA, teaches you a new language on how to communicate, and then your other half needs to take the similar course so that you're all talking the same language, so that you can move up or split. In my case, we split but we split beautifully. It was a great, it's like couples that know it's over that don't have the courage to tell each other. Insight makes you look at that. I'm talking about Insight here because it means a lot to me. And just go on the website. In the resource, you can hit MSIA and just Google Insight. So this is great editing by Josh Muscatine, who goes back and forth. I consider myself a great director, but all great directors have great editors. Scorsese has an editor that's saved him many times. I forgot her name. But I love this. I got, by the way, Tony Robbins did this for free. And I took Tony's courses, and they're amazing. It blew my mind. Before I got on discourses, I walked on fire. And he kicked me out of the line. I loved it so much, I walked on fire 3 times. And he was like, stop, you can't do that. So look how young Tony looks. He's cool, dude. I like him a lot. But dude, I did this 3 times at the Sheraton Universal. That's his place in Fiji. We all want something like that. I always liked Tony. I like all religions and all dudes, so I don't have anything negative to say. He really walks the talk. So, and if you want counseling right here in the physical about some things to get over, that's the dude, man. I didn't go into it, but time design was when I first moved in with JR and started working on staff with him. Everybody had time design. It was a great planner. Now it's your iPhone. But in the old days, you had to write it down on paper. And then you had to remember to go look at that page. So really, it's workflow. You got to adapt. Those people that use time design and writing stuff down adapt to the next thing. It might be an iCloud calendar.
Being squeezed into a short period of time, a great mass of energy.
As David Rayner. When I was 16 years old, I went to little tiny run-ins with peripherally about JR. And one of them was teen sharing at Lee Taylor Young's house. Later, I would find out it was Lee's house. But I was too into drugs and so scared about, I so wanted to be like him and that energy. And I was on the other side of it, scared to death. And then we ended up going to the same acting class. And by then I had done Insight 2. And then I worked for JR, and then we did Spiritual Warriors together. And we almost killed each other. I want it this way. But we're just, you know, he's an actor at heart. We're both actors. That's. I know he's a facilitator, but I mean, he's a great actor. He inspired me in a TV show called James the 16. Him and a white dude. And I'll confess something. I was a bedwetter, and in one of the segments, it's about a bedwetter, and I so related. There's Joey. Joey's the man now, CEO of Insight Seminars. There's Michael Hubbard, producer of Spiritual Warriors and My Little Havana. There's Joey and David, I think, or Michael and David, and they're helping the hill that just burnt. That's up at Mandeville. Jeannie Ford's Stacy, daughter. So that was kind of very. There's Patty Rayner, heartfelt. Patty's done a tremendous job. How we're taking care of the elders, people that pass away, people that are going to, people that go through some traumatic treatment. I mean, there's great stuff that she does, and everybody's young there, but they're up there. They're up there in years now. Flower. So that's David Rayner. That's the guy that came up with the flower idea in Spiritual Warriors. That's Arrowhead. JR's kids. It's kind of cool. Ron and Mary Holnick.
Studying in the movement. We started on discourses, and then a couple months after that, we received a letter from MSIA telling us about Insight One, and that there was going to be an Insight One in LA over July 4th. And
yeah, I never took USM. Why should I? I'm perfect. But I used to watch. I saw the cultivating the nurturing and the evolution of USM's growth, and how JR really actually to the benefit of Ron and Mary, they're the ones that constantly wanted to meet with JR and really adjust and change their direction and what they wanted to do. Always counseling with JR in the beginning, and now they're just super famous. They have a prison program that's, I know because Howard Lazar goes to it with Bob Brenner. They do excellent outreach to the prison population. They do women, and I think they're working on men, and I think that's, and it's kind of cool. Their programs are amazing. I like the look. Everything wasn't so sophisticated now, you know, like it is now.
And then we make the jump of faith into the spiritual truth and the invisible, and now we're bridging them down through you, in you, because of you. There's no other reason.
As I look back over the time that we've known JR, if there was one thing that I would look to, it would be the level of consistent.
Oh, so Ron worked with Neva Del Hunter from the Quimby Center. So he also, I mean, he comes from that era with Robert Waterman. I think it's New Mexico. So in the earlier days, we didn't talk about that in the interview much, but he definitely was schooled. And I think they met at their, do they talk about it? They probably do in the full interview.
It's where you're coming from inside when you
Look at the TVs. Okay, now see plasma TV now. So it was like a square 4x3.
We are all a threat to any institution on the planet because we're standing up in our freedom.
I like what JR is saying. We're standing up in our freedom.
By other governmental or institutional bodies. And I've had people from the criminal division, the IRS.
And that's the thing about, I think the prison program is amazing. You know, my stepfather was in prison and all that. My brother is still in prison. I think I've never been in prison except for juvenile hall. And I know that the freedom is in here that those guys have to work on as they do their time. I mean, that's the one thing they can't, I think the thing is the one thing that they can't take away from you is your choice to change your attitude. Awesome. But light and love to all those people that are incarcerated. So I've been, as a child of a person that was in prison, that was very traumatic when I would go visit my stepfather. Should we go into my therapy session right now? I don't think so. But light to that, and I'm really grateful that USM is working. I think that's David Paul and Bonnie Paul and Howard Lazar and many others.
So I meditated and I sit down and I said, okay.
All right, so this, we're getting into a juicy area. I'm bleeding in my thumb. So JR was starting these PAT 4 trainings, and the PAT 4 trips were out in the Middle East. The first one was in Rome and Germany. But I think I was on discourses, I was married, and I went to Prana to do some whatever, and I saw a promo. Probably Nancy Carter and Now Productions did it. I saw the promo of Israel and Egypt, and I was like, I got to do that. That's Benji. And that's where I told you I went to Israel 2 years ago. And this is what we did. We got we knew some Arab guys right here on the hill, and I paid them some money. I said, we need to get up on your hill, on your condo, and we want to overshoot. And it was really cool. These, Benji talks about that the Arabs that live on this hill, they've been there hundreds of years, the thousands, generationally. So they're called, he calls them the Crusader kids because you'll see an Arab guy with blonde hair and blue eyes. Because they come from the north, you know. As the invaders would come in, they would mix races, so you could see the difference. There's Michael Fader. I mean, I'll never forget Michael Fader. When Michael Fader was working with JR on those trips, it was insane. It was awesome. And I think on one trip, Saddam Hussein had taken over Kuwait. Kuwait, yeah. And so the crossing of the Suez Canal was blocked. And there was long lines of buses. And Michael Fader, and obviously JR's juice, he talked everybody to get in front of everybody and cross the Suez because we were late to get into Israel, which we would enter Israel through Eilat. This is party time. The caboose of this train that takes you, you can't say up, it's you can't say down, it's up towards Aswan. This is an overnight train. And then you bunk with your buddy, and the train was just old-fashioned train. And I got to look at JR, man. Those were amazing times. I did a few trips. I did 88, 89, 90, and then our last trip was 95. And then there's Fadl. So Fadl was the Egyptian guide. Notice everybody's good looking. So you had to make sure that you didn't confuse vacation, let's get together with some girl or guy while I'm in Egypt. You had to really hone in on the discipline because some great things would happen. This is the feluccas. I mean, I'm talking, so eventually you'll listen to what Fadl and Benji and everybody's saying, but I'm just giving you the outside experience. When I divorced my wife, I sacrificed, and I never told anybody this, but I took my ring and I threw it into the Nile River because I wanted to change my ways. And nothing negative on my wife. I just wanted to change. I wanted to do something different. And she went on to have other things, God bless her, and I went on to do my thing. But I knew in the Nile that I sacrificed. It was a big thing to sacrifice the ring. And sacrifice is a very interesting thing. So, you know, I'm not going to go into too much history about Egypt, but there is the Ptolemaic period, which is Greek-ish, and then there is Egyptian influence, and then Greek influence, Ptolemy, which is Queen Cleopatra and all that stuff. Regardless of that, it still has supersonic energy. And Telemarna is my favorite place. There's nothing there. Home of Akhenaten. And I would go back in 2004 and shoot spiritual warriors. But I was there. This was an early morning, 6 in the morning. Get out and meditate by the paws of the Sphinx, I think. And mosquitoes are biting you, and zzz. We used to have those little yellow radios. Sony came out with them. And you know, Phil Danza, through JR, went and got these Sennheiser, I think I'm pronouncing it right, transmitters. I think he's carrying it right there. And the transmitter goes to our radios. And Plaza de Concord, there's a few of them out there. But since we've left Egypt and haven't been back, they've just discovered so many things underneath the Luxor. Here's the tomb in the king's chamber. Smelled like urine. I can even smell it right now. Because people would spend the night and urinate in there and stink it up. But still, I mean, the power and the energy that you would feel. I think I was up there when JR did that. And John took that photo. There's JR talking about the portable radios. There's Benji. And this year is Zahava. His wife passed away of over 42 years. There's the Sennheiser. Look at that. This thing was cutting edge at the time. Nobody was doing this. I think we had 3. 1 for each guide. So good on you now, Productions. And look at this. I remember I rented a horse and ran through here with my eyes closed. A horse knows what to do. This whole thing is exhausting, but when JR takes you through these places, I went without JR, and it's not the same. Then you realize it's not really the location, it's the energy in the blood and in the spirit of the people. These are just stones. But you know, whatever JR was doing there when we were there, it was the group energy it surpasses anything I've ever. And I went in 2004 and 2007. And it's beautiful, but it wasn't this. So I mean, JR was riding this wave, like that Shakespeare quote. And that's a great shot overhead. That's a great shot. There's the buses. These guys can get up there in 15 minutes. That's me shooting a time lapse at 5 in the morning. I got up and it was 2 years ago. That was in the day when you can go to Temple Mount and go into the that beautiful mosque. Now it's just too crazy. This is, look at this. This Jewish center that's right here where that glass is. The Jewish center let me shoot on their roof. They were very nice to let me do that. It's a Hasidic school, and very cool. And this is Sea of Galilee. These tours that we took in 1995. That's Zahava, who passed away. Zeev, who passed away. And the connection that JR and Zeev. Zeev was amazing. I would steal JR's computer while he slept, and Z and I would play games on it, and then it would break, and in the morning JR would say, "What the hell did you do to my computer?" And then I would tell him and confess, and then Zeev would come and save me. So every night me and Zeev were doing computer stuff, and I remember JR did not like that. It's a great photo. Oh, it's very funny. You see this circle? Nothing there. Sometimes you'd be on the bus and they didn't have bathrooms on the bus, so the women would need to go out and pee. So a circle of women would surround women so that no one on the bus can see. Ooh, look at Vincent. He's so beautiful. Yeah, we were all beautiful. That's me, long hair. That's when I was married, and immediately I'm like, I love this guy. Because I was lost. I was definitely lost. My movie career was off. It was amazing, but I was a lost individual. This was St. Petersburg. This is beautiful. Beautiful. Of course, he had to put some suntan lotion on his scalp because it was burning. It was like 120 or something. That was 2 years ago. It was so amazing there. That's Benji when he had hair. And this was at Miracielo. They came down to visit. This is his home by Mount Tibor, and I did a time lapse. Vader. Wherever Michael Fader is, I got to tell you, I just witnessed so many great things when he would work with JR, and I saw miracles, the two of them, as I see it with everybody. When John works with JR or I do or anybody, it's like a light bulb turns on and you do magic. And JR would turn the light bulb on Michael Fader. He could do anything. You could do anything when JR is on stage with you or with you backing you up with whatever you're doing, you're on fire. That's what I feel with this movie. The counselings and the... Oh, by the way, that's Brian Wilson. We got permission. I got to meet his sons, and Annie Wilson really helped. God bless them. And the things that Carl did for JR and the movement were amazing. And he was such a special guy. My relationship was this at the Grace Retreats. I got to sing with him. It was awesome. My claim to fame. There, look, yeah. And then he's the one that told me, hey, go talk to Seth Riggs and go get some singing lessons, and I did. And therefore I can sing now. But look, that's what he would do. I mean, he would like unplug, sing, God Only Knows by himself. And he would do all the other voices. And he helped a lot of Insight and the Integrity Day, 924. Integrity. I love this whole integrity time. You know, and this is where we get into the controversy. Let's put it into perspective so people, I love history, and I'll take anybody on. This is the Merv Griffin Show. Pierce Brosnan met John Roger? Get out! And then he became James Bond. I love her. And soon after JR did interviews with her, her life changed for the better. She lives in Maui and sells nuts. Bill Maher changed too. Larry's been a great support of JR. I mean, he didn't drink the Kool-Aid, he's not in the movement, but I love Larry King that way. I love that he's a straight shooter. He's gangsta. Ain't nobody better than Larry King as an interviewer. People should learn from him. And he did this for free. I love the guy. Hey, so the other thing in perspective, for those that Rama was very instrumental. I mean, they were dating during Clinton, and we got to go to the inauguration. It was way before 9/11, so we were in their motorcade accidentally. So there's Jason. Jason's so in love with Ariana right now. You can see that. You can feel it. Jason's a great guy. He's got a great script about Jesus Christ. I love this interview. But during the integrity time period, you got to understand there was apartheid, there was a lot of things that Michael Fader and the JR Foundation and all them guys were doing, John, they were very visible. Celebrities were coming. With that comes the possibility of being attacked, no doubt. And imagine influences that don't want Desmond Tutu in America, trying to get funds and trying to get help from America to get Mandela out. You got to put it in perspective. At this point, Mandela's in jail. He is not president. Okay? And it's big time in South Africa. It's bad. It's Reagan time. You know, South America is with Iran-Contra. A lot of money. That's my acting teacher. And so it's a good time to hit at JR, because this was the height of his celebrityism, his celebrity. Look at, he came out, Oliver Stone came out with Born in the USA or whatever it was with Tom Cruise. So you gotta, I put it in a perspective and I put flesh and bones on it. It's a good time to hit JR. You want to discredit somebody like that. Why? Because he puts events like this. He helps try to release Lech Walesa out of jail to give him an award. Lech Walesa would become president of Poland. Mandela would become president of South Africa. You got to put it all into perspective, and then you'll realize you always got to look at, to connect the dots. I read a lot of spy books. But you have to connect the dots. What is the motivation to slander JR publicly? There's Lech Walesa. JR at this point had risen to a certain prominence. Well, let's knock him out. He's meeting Mother Teresa. He's giving awards to Mother Teresa. You know, it's huge. So with it comes, you know, you tear apart the weak people, and And, you know, and then in comes the controversy, and then you make it more than what it is. But I wasn't around, and we put the information out without naming people because I hate the whole thing. JR hit a bump on the road, and when I actually came in 1988 when people left, so I want to personally say I'm grateful people left. For all the old staff that left, except for Michael Fader, I didn't want him to leave because I liked him. But all the people that left, it was just me, JR, and John, and then John moved out, and it was just me and JR. So I'm very grateful to that. And I don't have any problems whatsoever. Had they not left, had this not happened, I doubt that I would be working with JR closely like this. So what might be a curse is a blessing for me. And when I did the interview, to put it in perspective for people, I didn't really care about controversy. I wanted to ask people, what was it about it? Did it hurt? Yes. And how did you get over it? Because the people that left were really close friends of people. They were like, it was like the Civil War in a sense. It's like brother fighting against brother. So I love that quote. Either love me or hate me, but indifference kills me. So there's Roseanne. I love her. So JR is my buddy, and I support him 100%, and I work for him, and all the things that they say I've never experienced. So, and I've been with him 25 years. And those guys that had to leave, thank God they left. You know, they got to do their lives and things like that. But one thing that I will say that is very clear working with John Roger is any type of deception or withholding, you're automatically gone. You're inside yourself. You've moved out. And, you know, you can't, that's in anything, you know. I watch mafia movies, you know. As soon as the guy's deceiving the Don, the guy's out. Except in mafia movies, they whack people. Here we don't. You just leave. There's the door. And Jared doesn't want to work with people like that. And it's not, and I love what Polly Sanderson says here, it's not for everybody. And so that's what I'll say. And I'll say plain and simple. Working with John Roger, you got to be super honest within yourself, and he sees that, and he can work with you on that. But when you're withholding and being deceptive and manipulative in here, and not really being forthright to a master teacher, you're in trouble, man. You're in trouble. And for me, my relationship with him, I confess, I'm like, yo, I'm in love with that girl over there, and I'm about to go over there and marry her, but I don't understand it. Can you explain to me, because I don't even know her? And then JR can have a conversation with you. But when you're withholding stuff, you know, sometimes I wanted to leave myself, and I would just tell him, hey, I feel like I want to leave. And he goes, well, that's not you. You're picking stuff up. And so you do a little bit of clearing. This is all like metaphysical stuff that I'm getting into. I might scare you. But, you know, these are all people that knew people that left, and, you know, they tell you their perspective, and they've been in there 40 years. So I'm not making anybody wrong or right. It's all about what is honesty. And there isn't honesty when people do what they do in a negative way. And I've known, you know, in the movie business, it's pretty treacherous, man. It's nowhere near what we do here in the movement. But, you know, the way they attack people in the show business, and I know personally, I know paparazzi that are in bed with the movie stars. And then how they promote and do all that, it's just a very manipulative kind of, and that's good. That's what they do. That's good for them. But I didn't really want to make, some people had said, oh, hey, why don't you put the controversy in the front of the movie? And I go, the controversy doesn't mean anything to me. And I don't even know why I want to even talk more about it. But I put it in the movie, and I wanted to give you my perspective on it. that people weren't there, and LA Times doesn't mean anything when you start to really grow up and start to learn. You know, right now in this world right now, there's a whole thing on the Sterling guy and the Clippers. You know, people, I'm not taking sides or anything. It's just when you can't even add the Clippers thing into here, but there is motivation in tearing somebody down, and that's not justifying that they're racist or not. I'm just saying when the motivation for the media to tear somebody down, it's always supported and paid for by the higher beings, you know, the people that own the papers. I remember when I talked to a paparazzi guy, I'm really good friends with paparazzi guys down the street, and they're going, Jsu, we get the call on who to go get. And I was like, really? Who? He goes, the magazines. So it's the magazines that have the heavy duty money that get bankrolled that say, go and get me a photo of Tom Cruise or such and such. And the paparazzis, they make a living. They go follow the orders. That's what they do. So it's really the media arm, these giant money-making guys. Whatever they want to do to destroy somebody or lift somebody, they do it. So if JR, here's my question. If JR wasn't that famous then, they wouldn't do anything. Who's this guy? But he rose to, you know, very high prominence, you know. Celebrities elbow to elbow. Political people. So with that comes, comes danger. You know, you can get slammed. You know, I'm not mentioning names, but if someone that's running for political office is studying with JR, they're going to attack the weakest point, which is, why are you studying with this guru? And they go after you, you know. It's all politics. And I remember I had some guy called me up and said, hey, he wanted to sell us a property. But this guy confessed to us that, the reason we attacked him wasn't personal. We just wanted to make sure that our candidate gets in the office, you know. I don't want to mention any names, but basically, you get the gist that the higher beings in politics or in any kind of money things, they just pick whoever they want. If you're associated with that person, that's just a really good angle to really tear somebody down. So that's what they do. But who cares? We've moved on. And the most amazing thing is when I moved in '88, I never saw JR get down on himself, or he didn't really care. I think what hurt him the most is that his friends left. The people that attacked him, he loved, you know, no matter what. And I never heard him say anything negative about them. And that's a true warrior. I mean, I'm upset because they attack him, but I never seen him upset. And then from '88 on, he just continued. We continued PAT trainings till '95, and we did a lot. And it's 2014. It's 2014, sorry. That's me when I was trying to Jerry curl my hair. I was trying to get curly hair like Jerry. And of course, this is when John got the keys. And I remember, I love John, but I remember when I was in Florida, and it was '88. JR gave the keys to John, and I heard about it at Brett Tabor's mom's house in Florida. And I was like, called JR, and I was like, oh my God, no! And I was crying. You know, for those people that are new, JR is a traveler, teacher to a lot of initiates and ministers. JR gave the keys to John. So we were like, wait a minute, do we have another boss? That basically in layman's terms. So I was like, and then JR said, no, you're mine. And I was like, great. So John became like my brother. And a lot of initiates wanted to make sure that they were under JR, and they were. And then John's got a whole lot of other new initiates. And, you know, and of course, I want them both to be my travelers, you know, cover my bases. But of course, my relationship and a lot of people's relationship, including John, is to JR. So JR is John's traveler. So this is our guy. So it's nothing against John. It's just like, hey, did I miss something? So so it was cool. And then from then on, I went to Pat 4 trainings. And this is the time, I was there where JR finalizes giving the keys to John. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful evening. It was 1988 at the Hilton. And you know, and what I will say about John is, you know what? He deserves it because he's like a rock, you know. And when everyone else faltered and freaked out and left, John stood like a 16-ton, you know. He didn't move. And that, and his dedication, and I'm speaking for him if he would let me, is his devotion is unquestionable. It's what it is. And he earned it, and it's his torch. And that's the way it is. It's a torch. So he deserves it, and he is JR's man. So, and that's what we support. I support. And this movie, though, is not a lot about John. Maybe they'll hire me and I'll do the John Morton story, but it's not anything negative toward John. Is I just wanted to do a movie about JR, and John is a piece of JR, and that's a whole other story. But JR influenced so many people, did so many things, and John was in a lot of that. So John was in a lot of that for sure. Oh, this is when they're talking about the worm. I was there, and John and JR were talking about the worm in the wall. And then this is when we were in London, 2007. But you know, it is a strange time now because people, you know, I take this back to biblical times. He's our guru. I mean, he's our king. He's our prophet, whatever. John's the next prophet, or he is the next prophet. And you know, we like the original guy, and we don't want the original guy to go. So that's the way it is. So, and life has it. This is Windermere. Awesome. Look at flowers. But 100% we support John, and I'm godfather to both his kids. So the alliance is like that. And the kids are big now. Zane's like 17 or something. And I think Claire's graduating college. Hi, Claire. And this is, look at the old Fremont Road. Man-made lakes. A lot of wells. And you know, and I said it in the movie, when John took over, it was great because it gave JR time to go do things. I spent a lot of time with JR doing things, and while John went off and did the what I call the tour, the regular tours around the country, from the U.S. to Australia to South America, and he still does it. Unbelievable. So look, while John's traveling right now in the East Coast or Midwest, I'm here with JR. We can go do things. So that's when we used to do the founders. There's a press. Great waiters. But that's me jumping in to kind of fill in what the editor did. But I love you, John, and I'm grateful that you're there to take care of things and move the teachings of JR forward and keep it alive. Keep it alive. And thank you, Prez, PK, Mark, and Vincent for all you do. And thank you, Nathaniel is my my right hand to supporting everything for JR. We really do a great job, hands down. I pat myself on the back on that one. And that's what we do. And I want to, you know, JR has nurses now. That's no secret. And I want to thank all those nurses that really have done a great job for JR. And there's Sarah. We did a lot of African trips. And Laura Donnelly, who did, I mean, it was Laura that took us with John to many places. So thank you, Laura, and of course Lee. We really liked Africa. I mean, JR liked Africa a lot. That's Eric Raleigh and Mark Harradine, former staff members. Once you're a staff member, you're a staff member. It's blood in, blood out. Look at this, Aaron Thacker. This was the cherry blossoms in Japan. It was a beautiful time. Sally Kirkland. Sally Kirkland and Lee were our in-house movie stars. And they would always get out there and get JR's work out there. And they've been just loyal. There's Angel too. There's Nat. Flowers. So, you know, I've only done 27 years. There's people that have done way more than me. And this, I was there. I was actually filming this. And there's Hillary, first year administration, Al Gore, Clinton. You know, there was an interesting energy between Bill Clinton and JR, and it was amazing. And there's Yogi Bhajan. I wasn't there. This is John Paul. He's now a saint. I was there for Menem, Argentinian president. I was there for Armand Hammer in the Soviet Union, Moscow, 91. I was there for Obama. And the one thing I want to say is JR's not political. So what he is, in my opinion, is it's good to have JR in the room no matter who you are, because the energy gets put into you to do good things and to do things as best you can. So whether it be Obama, George Bush, we would have gone to the George Bush thing, we just didn't get invited. So, but Clinton invited us. JR was #1 New York Times bestseller then. Now let's get to the movies. JR would always tell me, that's my mom. JR would always tell me, write your scripts, because I was always frustrated that, you know, I wasn't working enough as an actor. And JR was like, write scripts, write scripts. So we wrote scripts, and that's how it started with Spiritual Warriors, The Wayshower. And in no means am I that great of a director monetarily. I'm just great because I'm great, and it doesn't have to be because of I made this much money or I lost this much money. There's Zane with my flowers. And I mean, look at him. I knew him when he was wearing Pampers. And Claire too. You know, the best part of this movie I found out, because we didn't know the ending, was finding out that the kids are what JR is leaving behind. Like what Irwin has given Adam and Crescent, and through Irwin and JR's personal connection, that's Benji's son, Gilly. You know, there's just something, you know, Adam walks away with, and he's such a beautiful kid. He's a man now. And these are all great guys. That's Denial. So, and it's what John and Laura instilled in He just passed away, and that's Ariel. She's an amazing kid. Zane and Claire. She's an amazing singer. The three of them, it was her, Olivia, and Claire, used to sing to JR when they were kids. And I think we're coming to the end here. It's very nice. It's been a... There's Claire going down in a gondola. I wanted to say, as we're getting closer, oh, that was Santorini. That was the ship I think I was sick on. Look at Jeffrey Morgan, dude. These were all babies when I came around, or not even born. And now they're grown men, married, lawyers. There's Trish. JR's a nurse, great lady. That's when JR was in Spain. 2007, we did an amazing tour of, oh, if I could have went on. I felt like it was so amazing. We went from Spain, Barcelona, London, Denmark, Sweden, hitting the Spiritual Warrior. It was a great tour. Toledo. That was amazing. Glen Eagles, JR's favorite place. And I remember we crossed the Irish Sea from Scotland to Ireland. That was an amazing trip. That's the Morgans. And that was the barn that we would have seminars in, and then have our horses. There's Corinne Bale. That was a crazy trip. That's when I said, I want to be at sunset in Normandy. And we all, I think we were going like 100 million miles an hour. That's the great David Wynn, who did the Beatles' great sculpture. He did Beatles sculpture. That's in Scotland. The Rob Roy area. That's New York. The New York crew. That was in the Wadi Rum in Jordan. So spiritual there. So loved it. And where they did the movie, parts of the movie of Lawrence of Arabia. And I like this moment. This Josh picked this. Just JR. And the way he found what Polly Sanderson was saying. I was there, it was 95. I got salmonella on the cruise ship, almost died. And I was hallucinating in bed. JR had a cot next to me in the hospital. And it was before the Lord of the Rings movies, and I was seeing Lord of the Rings movies in my head. I was hallucinating, sick, 110 degree, I don't know, temperature. And JR goes, just go with it. And so I did. There's JR. Henry Conyers. I love the way we bookmark this movie with Henry Conyers. That's it. You guys have been great. So I'll talk to you some more as we do the... I love what David Sands said about this, that this is very musical. And it is. The movie has musicality. Laurie Lerner, producer. Editor Josh McKean. Josh Muscatine, Aaron Thacker, visual arts, Thor Wixon. The score was by these guys. I can't pronounce their name, but they were great. Dean, my recorder, amazing. Dane Davis, I love you. He's now at Lucas Ranch. Barbara Whelan, I love you. Zoe Golightly, I love you. Line producer, she works super hard. A line producer does a lot of work in my productions. They do a lot of work. Rick Ojeda was line producer in the other two, and he knows what that's like. Look at all those credits, and it was crazy because we just wanted. I go OCD on credits. I got to really have everybody credited, and the spelling has to be right, the margins have to be right, and Aaron Thacker did this. And even people that didn't make the interview, I give them credit. It was great. You know, Mark, Lurie, and I worked a lot in getting the legal stuff out of the way. In movies, you got to get people's permission. So everybody that I roughly interviewed, I got their waivers. If I didn't, please send them in. Obviously, anything that was publicly filmed and under MSIA, we own. So that's, you can't do nothing about that. And in terms of Merv Griffin and things like that, we paid for. We paid a lot of money for that stuff. Dave Mason's music, Carl Wilson's music, for the trailer, for everything. So it gets expensive. Because I wanted, the MSI music is obviously ours, thank God, but we wanted to make sure that music be, Carl Wilson's music was very important. I fought for that, and we got it. And I want to thank Annie and the boys, Wilson boys. That man that you just saw before Michael Fader is JR's old classmate of, I don't know, 50 plus years. David Allen was amazing because there's Steve. But basically, there's Norma House. She passed away. Steve passed away. But basically, I forgot what I was going to say, but that was JR's schoolmate, that guy, the old guy I just told you about. Lori Lerner did a great job by getting me the footage, the film, the camera, and she's been a great producer and a great contributor in every way. So these are all the songs. We had to credit everybody, ones that we bought. So everybody gets seen and known and appreciated. So it would drive me crazy because I'd be watching the movie over and over and we'd be like, oh, geez, it's missing a comma. Let's get Aaron Thacker in here, redo it. This guy's great. He sold me some Arabic music. Larry King, we had to buy that. The Merv Griffin, we had to buy that. The Politically Incorrect, we had to buy that. Radiance, that 60s weird collagal type film was Radiance. The Roseanne Show gave us permission. The Bright Side, that's Laren Bright. Doonesbury we had to pay. Peter Max, he did that one for free. And all the people that helped for scanning, Timothea, just tons of people. Rosie von Zermelo, Jay Scott. I want to thank John Morton, the Traveler, JR, the family, the Hinkins, Carl Wilson, Jonah, Justin, Barbara, David Wynn, Eric Roberts, Ezra Mack, the Presidency, the Ministerial Family Board, Naturat, Nurses Steve Beach, Steven Soderbergh, Peter Max, Phil Danza, Rama Fox, Richard Green, Sam Wiggin, Larry King, in memory of Joanne Kane, Norma Howe, Steve Farrick, and Zahava. This is interesting. Jer's with a lion. And Jer and I had our genetics tested. And some of our parent, like our great whatever, come from Gilgamesh. And so I started the logo Gilgamesh. There's the Gilgamesh king with his lions. So I thought it was interesting, JR. I didn't plan on that, but putting the two together. So that's it. I wanted to thank everybody for sitting through this. I hope you go on Facebook. I hope you go to your resources. If you're new, go check out the teachings. They're pretty cool. If you're not new, I want to thank all the MSIAers, everybody in the movement, for everything that I got to experience and got to give back. I wanted to always give back to JR. And I do this for JR because I love him so much. And I want to make the example that I wish we can all love each other the way we love JR. And on that note, Berush Beishan, I love you.